Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kakashi becomes serious with Naruto on the missions part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kakashi looked at the memorial stone and thought. The mission to Nami no Kuni, one that was supposed to bring some order and calm to his team, turned out to be a mess. Naruto used Kyuubi's chakra for the first time, while Sasuke unlocked the Sharingan. It also showed that while their teamwork was decent, they didn't know much actual knowledge, a very bitter thing for Kakashi to swallow. Perhaps they need individual training, someone said, and Kakashi's head jerked when he identified the person as Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage. It wasn't unheard of for the team to be temporarily broken, with each of its members receiving individual tutoring. Kakashi turned and looked at the aged leader who walked towards him in the pristine white and red robes of the reigning Hokage. Kakashi was aware that Sarutobi Hiruzen was one of the most deadly shinobi around, but in the robes he wore he looked like an elder or a sage. A relatively harmless, yet wise person. I read your report about the mission, Hiruzen continued and paused, looking at the onyx black surface of the stone. And I know that what you wrote in it isn't entirely correct. That you think that they need some kind of a shock, or maybe a change before you allow them to participate in the Chunin exams we will host. It's not that, Kakashi said, and his fist clenched. I failed them as a sensei and a leader. I should have prepared them before the mission and make sure they are ready for it. The only one that has some skills is Sasuke. Naruto and Sakura lack skills or the knowledge how to use them. The Hokage stood there watching the monument, and Kakashi followed the gaze of the elder leader, just to notice him focus on the name Namake's Minato before slipping towards the rest of the ones killed when Kyuubi broke free. We all learn from our mistakes, Kakashi, Sandaime Hokage said, and gave him a look. You are calmer and more analytical than some of your fellow Jonin. I know Jonin that have years more of experience, and aren't that keen to acknowledge that they failed their team. The Hokage allowed himself a small smile, a thing that shocked Kakashi. Of all things, he didn't expect the Hokage to smile. Tell me, Kakashi, you know that they lack training and need to develop. What would you do, or better, what would your sensei do? Kakashi averted his gaze from the monument and focused on the Hokage. Minato-sensei would have tried to assign each of them a teacher that could help them overcome their problems, and let them develop as shinobi. And what stops you from doing exactly that? The question was pointed and it stung Kakashi badly. He closed his eye and took several long breaths before opening it and looking at his leader and commander. Because I believed, foolishly thought, that they could learn that on their own and allow me to focus on their teamwork and team cohesion. Not everybody is a prodigy, the Hokage said quietly and walked away from the memorial stone. Walk with me, Kakashi. Hi, Hokage-sama. Sandaime Hokage walked into the woods and headed deeper into the forest, into the part that was as old as the village itself. If not older. You know the will of fire, the Sandaime said, and Kakashi only nodded. Then you know that sheer power is not everything, and you should know that not many are geniuses that develop their own jutsu before the age of 13. Most needs careful nurturing and training to let their talent grow and flourish. Of all of your genin, Sasuke-kun is maybe not a genius, but he had some clan training before Itachi-kun murdered his clan, and since then he strives to be better than Itachi. While Sakura is from a civilian family and never had the support nor the opportunities Sasuke or even Naruto had and have, Kakashi said, and wanted to berate himself mentally, but then stopped and looked at the Sandaime. She's incredibly smart, a useful trait, but lacks the mental toughness of a shinobi, as well as skills that are useful on the battlefield. On the other hand, Naruto is a genin that has all the potential in the world and drive to be the best shinobi, yet was pulled down at the academy and nobody rectified those mistakes. It was partially your duty, the Sandaime said gently, and Kakashi only nodded. No matter how the words stung, he couldn't say much. It's not only Naruto that struggles after they graduate from the academy. Some others also skipped classes or weren't treated fairly. One of your tasks as a jonin and their sensei was to notice what was taught badly and correct it. Yet the council and you pushed me to focus on Sasuke, Kakashi said and glared at his leader. Even if everybody knows that Sasuke is the one that needs the attention the least, lack of it could have been good for him. The Sandaime nodded, and for once Kakashi could see the weight of the ages and experience on the shoulders of his leader. We all made mistakes, Sarutobi Hiruzen said quietly, but then Kakashi heard steel to this voice. Steel he rarely heard in the voice of the aged Kage. Now is the time for you to fix them, Kakashi. As long as you will bring results, I'm willing to bend the rules for you and the team, but you need to give me the results by the time of the Chunin exams. Kakashi closed his eye and did the math. There were 5 to 7 months before the first round of the exams, and that ought to be plenty of time to turn the cute and sorely lacking in skill genin of his into a somewhat competent team that had a good chance in the exams. I will have 2 requests, Kakashi said, and then frowned as Hokage looked at him. No, 3. 1. Mitarashi Anko will be pulled from the roster of ninja that can go on missions. 2. Anbu Tora will be pulled out of the Anbu, and finally I can tell Naruto something about his parents. Mitarashi Anko will be made available for you, the Hokage said, and then added, looking pointedly at Kakashi. As much as her schedule will allow for. She's one of the best intelligence-gathering people we have. So I fear anything more you will need to discuss with Ibiki. That I can live with, Kakashi said. But I also have other choices in mind, Inuzuka Hana or Yahi Kurinai. However, Enko-chan will be the best person for the job, and I assume that she should oversee the training of the sole kunoichi of your team, the Hokage said with some faint smile. Yes, that will be a good idea. The gaze of the aged leader focused on Kakashi. As for Naruto, no, you can't tell him quite yet. Maybe when he makes Chunin. Now I don't think he can be entrusted with the knowledge. The knowledge might push him to his limits, Kakashi said quietly. Sensei is his idol, and the one who sealed Kyuubi inside of him, the Hokage added grimly. No, he needs to get ready for it. I don't think we want to have a horde of IWA assassins in the village, all of them wanting to murder Naruto because of Minato. Kakashi nodded and pulled out his Aika book and started to read it, ignoring his leader for a second. What about the Uzumaki clan heritage of his, then? Hokage jerked at this and glared at him. You don't think that it is much wiser? Everybody assumes that Uzumaki are dead, Kakashi said in his defense. And I don't think anybody outside of Uchiha Mikoto who is dead and Jiraiya-sama can tell that there is a connection between Kushina-sama, Naruto and Minato-sensei. That is true, Hiruzen mused and looked at the Hokage monument visible in the distance. I will need to think on it, and decide what can be safely disclosed to him. Now, however, why do you want Tenzo? Sasuke, Kakashi said and allowed himself a smile under his mask. For once that spoiled brat needs a good beating or two and I am sick of his Avenger mentality. I get that he wants to kill Itachi, good for him, but as of now he is more of Orochimaru than anything. Itachi did something to the boy, the Hokage said and shook his head. Danzo, why did you make me do this? But that is a matter that can't be addressed now. I will have Tenzo be given new identity, and pulled out of ANBU. Kakashi nodded and the next moment the aged leader was gone in a swirl of leaves, leaving the silver-haired Jonin to ponder upon the content of their talk and the consequences it would have for the future of him and the team. He didn't want to fail them, and now he felt that he had a decent chance of achieving just that. A certain sage in a faraway land sneezed violently. He somehow thought about his godson and the fact that perhaps he should have considered checking on him. He was away from Konoha for close to 10 years by now. The world was strangely silent, no new plots and no new threats outside of a certain snake lurking in the sand. The sage grimaced at that. Was his former teammate that foolish and arrogant? A pale and dark-haired individual was hard not to be spotted in the sand and even harder not to be seen when they were a wanted criminal. A criminal that had the biggest total bounty on their head since a really, really long time. The sensei might be getting senile, the sage said inside, shaking his head sadly. But Ibiki or Shikaku should have been able to spot this plot. He paused and his eyes widened for a second. Unless someone is running interferences and there is a skilled spy inside of Konoha. One that eluded everybody's attention. He finished his sake and with a heavy heart walked out of the inn he was staying in. The time to come home and check what was going on was upon him, and in far grimmer times than he originally hoped for. Checking on Naruto and maybe teaching the kid a thing or two moved down the list of to-do things to the very bottom. With Orochimaru plotting and hoping to kick Konoha in the crotch during the exams, he needed to act fast and prevent some of the damage. Sarutobi Hiruzen poured himself sake and drank it before sitting down and looking at the village visible from the windows of his office. It looked so calm and peaceful, yet underneath that quiet and kind outer skin there was the darkness he didn't want to admit. Danzo, his estranged teammate, was a criminal that acted in the shadows for what he believed was good of the village, a thing with which Hiruzen couldn't agree and disagree at the same time. Some of his actions were good and useful, but the vast majority was a risk to the village and its inhabitants. It wasn't the time to pluck that weed out of the forest, but perhaps it was a time to scare Danzo a bit and remind him that the Hokage was the one who controlled the village, not Danzo. Fetch me Shikaku and Tora, Hokage said and then added after a moment. And Ibiki. It wasn't the most subtle or safe of moves, but without the latter two the chance to mess with Danzo was almost non-existent, and Shikaku was needed for a certain adjustment to the plans. Even if some were fooled by his appearance as a gentle and kind shinobi, he still had the intelligence and ruthlessness that let him steer Konoha through 2 wars, and it seemed that some forgot that there was a reason why he was called Shinobi no Kami. With that done, the Hokage poured himself more sake and slowly sipped, his mind going over possibly alliances and villages that could be coerced or convinced to attack Konoha. Kiri was out of question since they still had their bloody war going on, and Yagura wasn't keen on giving up easily. Kumo was watching and waiting and had their issues with IWA. And IWA was still licking its wounds after Kiroi Senko massacred them, and Inoki didn't want second slaughter. So Suna, Kusa, Taki or Aim, Sandane muttered and looked out of the window. I expected more flair from you, Orochimaru. You were a genius, a prodigy, and now you can't play the game of politics with an old monkey. Those musings were cut short by Shikaku, Tora and Ibiki arriving in the office. The Hokage looked at them and then signed at his guards to leave the room. There was no need for onlookers to be present when he wanted to plan the strategy. He trusted his ANBU. But there was no such thing as too much security, especially when dealing with his rogue teammates and students. Hokage-sama, Shikaku said in bored voice, and Sandame looked at him. Why did your ANBU needed to pull me away from my nap? Chunin exams, the Hokage said, and he could feel all 3 of them tense. Even if Tora was an ANBU and knew how to hide emotions, Summoning 3 high-ranking ninja to discuss Chunin exams was unheard of. First thing, Tora, since now you are pulled out of ANBU and transferred to the normal forces, Kakashi-kun requested your help with training one of his genin, and I can see a benefit of it. Which one? Shikaka asked, and the boredom was gone from his face. Uchiha Sasuke, the Hokage said and waved his hand to silence protests from Shikaku and Tora. Yes, he is a spoiled brat, and yes, Kakashi is supposed to train him, but he wants someone to knock some sense into the thick skull of that boy. Then the Hokage looked at Tora. You served with Kakashi in the same team, and since you knew Itachi, I believe you can deal with boys' issues and get him to think. It has some merits, Marino Ibiki of all people said, and Hokage inclined his head towards the scarred leader of their torture and interrogation division. The brat is used to people handling him everything on a silver platter. I took a look at his academy reports, and had one of the Yamanakas take a look at him, and he is becoming like Orochimaru, the Hokage finished, and Ibiki only nodded. Breaking him might be the only option then, Tora said and winced. I will do what I can, Hokage-sama. Hokage nodded and dismissed the ANBU before looking at the remaining shinobi. How much can we bend the rules and get away with it? Depends, what do you want to achieve, Shikaka said and shrugged. Danzo or your 2 other teammates aren't stupid. Kakashi wants peace when training his team and as little distractions as possible, the Hokage said. No missions, no pesky requests, and as little politics as possible. Missions will be the easiest to avoid, Shikaka said and frowned. However, keeping the curious eyes off them will be a challenge. Root is very much alive, no matter what we pretend, and your teammates have their own spies and agents. Ah yes, the Hokage said and smiled. Root, the soulless agents of Danzo. Then the gaze of the old leader hardened and he focused on Ibiki. Can you rattle them a bit? I believe my old teammate forgot a bit his proper place and needs a pointed lesson. Should I arrest and interrogate them? Ibiki asked with a grim smile. Or just scare them? Do as you see fit. The freedom of movements the agents of Danzo and our enemies have is troubling. The Kage looked out of the window, ignoring the 2 ninja. I don't want to start another war, and Kami help me, but I will do everything to prevent it. Even if it means permanently removing the agents working inside of Konoha, and even if it means killing my rogue student, Hokage-sama, Shikaku started to say, and Hiruzen looked at him. You look worried. Hiruzen snorted at this, allowing himself to behave more like a normal, kind human. I'm not worried, he said amused. Tell me, Shikaku, which of the villages that is close to us can pose a threat to us? Possibly Suna, Shikaku said and frowned. Yandame Kazekage has a potent Kekkei Genkai that would be a hard thing to counter. The rest lacks either the manpower or the firepower to be more than an annoyance that makes us consider them a bug to squeeze. The Hokage nodded. He heard the same statement over and over again. After all, one that had maybe 1,000 ninja in total couldn't pose a serious threat to someone who had close to 20,000 ninja and could mobilize few thousand more if pressed. However, that was for a pitched battle. An event like the Chunin exams were a different scenario. What if they attacked us during the exams? The Hokage wondered aloud and Shikaku's eyes widened. We would have a problem, was the only answer from Nara Patriarch. There are dozens of nobles, dozens of feudal lords, each of them requiring some protection, not to mention masses of civilians and foreign genin and their sensei. Hokage-sama, are you implying that we might be attacked during the exams? Ibiki asked, making Hokage look in his direction. It all suggests as if you were expecting such an attack. I'm not expecting such an attack, the Hokage said and shifted, hiding his unease. I'm merely trying to understand the logic behind certain actions of a rogue student of mine, well, him and a certain teammate of mine. Both of them are up to something and I want to have your opinions and thoughts on the issue. Do you assume that Orochimaru and Danzo are working together? Ibiki asked, voicing a question Shikaku wanted to ask, but wasn't too sure. I wouldn't put it past them, but I don't think they want to draw more attention than necessary, the Hokage said and frowned. Besides, Orochimaru's mind is so twisted and warped that I think he would have died first and asked Danzo for help. Danzo would be more willing to acquire help as long as the end result was him being the Hokage. But he is clever and knows well that I'm not a senile old man many think I am. None of them has the manpower to attack Konoha alone or carry out a coup when nobody sees it, Shikaku mused aloud. But if they use a third party like one of the nearby villages that have a grudge against us, then maybe they have a chance. Team 7 was one of the most famous or infamous teams of Konohagakure no Sato. In some villages, names of the shinobi from those teams was used by the mothers to scare their kids into obedience. In Konoha, however, it was seen as the best and the most prestigious one. Being a sensei of it was an honor, or that was what Kakashi heard when he received it. Since then he doubted it, while the original Team 7, with the current Hokage as a part of it, and under the tutelage of the Shodame and Nidame, was great. Same as the next generation, this one taught by the Sandame Hokage. They were the Sannin, the 3 best ninja of their generation who won their fame and glory on the blood-soaked fields of the last war. Then came the team of Jiraiya of the Sannin, from which came Yandame Hokage, Namikaze Minato, and under his tutelage Kakashi's team was the previous generation. A dysfunctional team, yet it somehow worked and their sensei managed to keep it together. Kakashi wished his sensei was back, as the team he was now given was a troublesome, and even more dysfunctional. They were bickering and in some cases disobedient, not to mention their rebellious streak and the complete lack of respect for him, which didn't bother him too much, but was an annoyance and other jonin pointed it out. He shrugged and with that cheerful image he walked to the border of the training ground 44. It was the main venue of the Chunin exams and the home of Mitarashi Enko, a person feared even inside of Konoha. Kakashi winced at that. It wasn't entirely her fault that Orochimaru was her former sensei, and even less that she was given the seal he developed. But for once Kakashi was glad that she was so feared in Konoha. Sakura needed a pointed lesson or two, and who was better at that than a crazed snake summoner? He couldn't find any other suitable shinobi outside a few A and B that were too precious to drag away from their duties. He stopped at the outskirts of the forest, and dodged a kunai that appeared out of nowhere. "Yo, Enko!" he yelled. After a second the trees shuddered and Mitarashi Enko dropped onto the ground in front of Kakashi. "What do you want, Kakashi-kun?" Enko asked as she approached him. "Coming to find me in my domain." "Brave of you." "A favor," he said and smiled. "A student of mine, one Haruno Sakura, would have some use of your tutelage." Enko paused and a snake slithered out of the sleeve of her coat. "Why should I babysit a genin?" she asked cheerfully. "I have better things to take care of than a genin of yours." "She has potential," Kakashi said, and I smiled. "She's from a civilian family, and needs someone like you to realize that the world of shinobi is less than the stories she heard, and more grim." "Oh," Enko purred as she moved closer to Kakashi, who didn't even blink at this. He served in ANBU and that made him see even more obvious attempts at seduction. "Now, Kakakun, why you didn't mention this before? She sounds much more interesting than you initially said." Kakashi I smiled and ignored her behavior. He was here on business, and for more pleasant things he had time when the duty was done. "Because you would have kidnapped her and dragged back to your home before letting me explain," he said and looked at Enko. "Can you restrain yourself a bit?" he asked and then went on, ignoring her protests. "While I appreciate your methods, you will control yourself, and don't go too wild on her. She might not survive your more crazy ideas, and I don't want to fill out paperwork for a killed-in-action genin." Enko pouted at this and shoved her body against Kakashi, only to be coldly shoved back by him, the gaze of his eye telling her that enough was enough, and she should remember her place. "Fine, I will try to restrain myself," she said and smiled. "But you pay for all the dango I will eat until she's my student." "Pay for all of the dango?" "Yes," Enko said and smiled. "It isn't that expensive, and you want your kunoichi trained, don't you?" Kakashi only nodded at this, making Enko's smile turn into a grin. "Tell me, where your team usually meets and when?" "Training ground 3, Kakashi said and then added. "At 9. Before he finished those words Enko was gone, and he stared only at a slowly disappearing cloud of smoke and dust. He blinked and bit down on his lip, hard enough to end any possible genjutsu. He never saw her move so fast or be so excited at the idea of meeting a genin of all fucking people. The next morning one Uzumaki Naruto arrived at the training ground 3 blissfully unaware of the evil plans of his so far laid-back sensei. The couple of clouds moving across the sky and the sun above didn't herald any world-shattering events. In fact, it was as ordinary of a day as one could imagine. Even his teammates seemed unaware of the changes that were about to happen to their lives and team. "What a lovely team you have, Kakashi," Tenzo, also known as Tora, and Yamato muttered from his perch on one of the lower branches of an ancient oak. "Naruto's clothing screams kill me, Sakura's hair even more so. Only the broody, I assume Sasuke, is somewhat more aware of his surroundings and less obvious. Sakura's dress isn't much better," Enko commented cheerfully as a snake slid out of the sleeve of her coat. Yes, I will have a lot of fun with her." The next morning one Uzumaki Naruto arrived at the training ground 3 blissfully unaware of the evil plans of his so far laid-back sensei. The couple of clouds moving across the sky and the sun above didn't herald any world-shattering events. In fact, it was as ordinary of a day as one could imagine. Even his teammates seemed unaware of the changes that were about to happen to their lives and team. "What a lovely team you have, Kakashi," Tenzo, also known as Tora, and Yamato muttered from his perch on one of the lower branches of an ancient oak. "Naruto's clothing screams kill me, Sakura's hair even more so. Only the broody, I assume Sasuke, is somewhat more aware of his surroundings and less obvious. Sakura's dress isn't much better," Enko commented cheerfully as a snake slid out of the sleeve of her coat. Yes, I will have a lot of fun with her." "Enko, don't kill her," Kakashi said, and she shrugged at her glare. "I didn't say you shouldn't try to murder her if you think it will wake her up. But don't actually do the deed." "I didn't say that I will kill her," Enko said with an unnervingly cheerful smile. "I only stated that her dress screams kill me. And her hair is also a problem." Enko then paused and slowly turned to look really closely at Kakashi. "Did you or anybody else explain to her why such long mane of hair can be a problem?" Kakashi blinked and then frowned. "I assumed that the academy explained it to them," he said slowly. "I didn't do it as I thought that since the academy did it she would know it." Enko sighed and the snake that slid out of her coat hissed threateningly. "Kakabaka," she murmured and then turned to look at Tenzo. "I'm curious, what do you think about your broody?" "Will be a handful," Tenzo said and shrugged. "For once I wish he was like Itachi. For all of his faults, Itachi actually listened to what you said. Yet he slaughtered his own clan," Kakashi murmured quietly and then looked at his friends. "I'll come first and have a chat with them before you two come. I don't want my cute little genin scared by you." Naruto yawned as he looked at the sky. Their sensei was once again late, this time even later than usually, but that tardiness was a thing Team 7 managed to get used to. But it didn't matter much as they were still grumpy and irritated by it. Naruto sighed and slumped against a tree. Then a swirl of leaves appeared in the middle of the training ground and seconds later in its place was standing Kakashi. He smiled at them and even angry outburst of Naruto. "You're late." Didn't seem to irritate him. Ma, he said and looked at them. "For once I have a valid excuse. I was talking with Hokage-sama about the future of the team." At those words even usually broody Sasuke snapped out of mood and looked at Kakashi. The cold, emotionless onyx black eyes focused on the older shinobi with something more than irritation visible in them. "He suggested that for the time being the team is split," Kakashi said and swiftly ignored Naruto's outburst. "Yes," Kakashi said and easily blocked hot-headed Uzumaki. "It is unusual for a fresh genin team, however similar things happened in the past, and we believe it will be for the better of the team if the next 6 months you spend with a sensei on your own." In two bursts of smoke and leaves appeared two shinobi that made even Naruto back away. He was a hot-headed one, but there was something unnerving in the way those two looked and behaved. Something that suggested he shouldn't test them, or it would end badly. "Those two are Mitarashi, Enko and Yamato," Kakashi said and I smiled. "Sakura, you will be training under Enko and Sasuke, you will be trained by Yamato." Sasuke jumped down from his perch and glared at Yamato. "How can he teach me how to defeat my brother?" he asked, not even bothering to hide his hostility or anger. He didn't have a chance to say more as Yamato moved and sent Sasuke crashing against the tree. "I suggest that you don't underestimate me, Sasuke-kun," Yamato said and approached the Uchiha. "I don't have the Sharingan, but I'm still a Jonin and making an enemy out of me can be a risky move on your part." Sasuke looked up, still dazed by the force of the punch, and then the unforgiving and hard tree trunk. He didn't say anything, he only spit out blood and glared at the shinobi with a challenge in his eyes. This single moment made it obvious for Naruto why he was so unsettled by those shinobi. Kakashi-sensei looked friendly and less scary. Those didn't bother hiding the fact that they could kill him. No, they showed it openly. "With that done," Kakashi said, looking at Sasuke with no kindness or compassion in his soul eye. A thing that unnerved and freaked out Naruto even more. "It leaves only me and Naruto." With those words he smiled and looked at Naruto. "Next 6 months you will spend being trained by me and I won't be a gentle person." Kakashi paused and looked at Yamato and Enko. "Go and have fun and don't murder them." Before he finished saying those words Enko and Yamato were gone. "Sakura and Sasuke too, Naruto," Kakashi said as he crossed the distance separating them. "I may be tardy and friendly and still am. But not now." Naruto looked at his Jonin, unsure what Kakashi was going to say next. "I will train you to the best of my abilities and will push you harder than before. However, first time for a bit of a history lesson." History lesson that the academy should have covered. Those last few words Kakashi said with venom Naruto never saw from his sensei. Enko dropped Sakura on one of the larger branches of the outskirts of the Forest of Death, and then looked at the younger Kunoichi with contempt and irritation. "Kakashi-kun managed to convince me that I should train you," Enko said. "Now tell me why should I do it?" Sakura was dazed for a second and several precious moments passed before she managed to put together her thoughts. "I was useless during our mission to Nami no Kuni," she said and sobbed. "Even Naruto Baka was better." Enko scared and Sakura looked at her, only to shriek when a cobra slid out of Enko's coat. "A lovely snake," Enko said with a fond smile, her hand caressing the head of the snake. "A king cobra, venomous and deadly. Just like I." Then she paused her musings and looked at Sakura. "I'll call you Pinky for now. I really dislike your attitude and the way you call Naruto." Sakura was ready to speak, but Enko ignored it. "If you knew one of his parents, well, you would have bowed in front of him in apology." "Heck, I'm surprised that Kakashi didn't tell you a thing or two about certain Hokage." Enko frowned and then smiled. "For now this is enough chat," she smiled, her teeth flashing in a feral smile. "Time for fun." "Sensei, what do you mean by fun?" Sakura asked. "You run. I chase you," Enko said as she pulled out a kunai. "I will give you 10 minutes of time to lose me. Then I will start." Sakura looked at Enko, confusion clearly visible in her eyes. Then she noticed the kunai Enko was holding and started to run. Enko looked at the slowly disappearing form of Sakura and frowned. She really expected more from the best kunoichi of the year. Either the academic knowledge became so much more important, or someone bent the rules. Nowadays Enko didn't know which one was more probable, but the quick look at Sakura's files revealed nothing outstanding. Nothing outside of her chakra control, a thing that wasn't an unusual thing considering the gender. Women in general tended to have finer control. What worried Enko was the behavior and the attitude Sakura had. "She's adoring Sasuke," Enko murmured and sat down on the branch. What will it take for her to realize that the Uchiha doesn't see her as anything more than a hindrance? She paused and looked at the canopy and the sparse rays of sunlight passing through it. "I bet he actually respects Naruto more." "Jinchuriki have power," Enko said and blew hair out of her eyes. "Even if they don't show it, their environment can feel or sense it. With the kid's parents being Yandame-sama and an Uzumaki, he is bound to have more power than even Kyuubi would give on its own." She considered what she said for a moment and snorted. "I bet if the girl knew about his parents, she would have kissed his ass, just to have his attention." Now it is a time to see how much she knows, Anko said and got up, her hand reaching into one of the holsters for a couple of shuriken and a spool of ninja wire. She was going to test the girl, but she wanted to have fun too. Tenzo dropped Sasuke onto the concrete floor of the room, locked the door and then looked at the last loyal Uchiha. The boy was an enigma and one that smelled like Orochimaru, too. The reports from the academy suggested that the boy was a prodigy and genius, like any and all Uchiha before him. Tenzo snorted and Sasuke looked up, his eyes filled with anger and resentment. You are no prodigy, Tenzo said and smiled when Sasuke looked like he wanted to rip out his throat. Itachi was. You are smart and intelligent boy that one day might become a capable shinobi. Now you are nothing. Sasuke launched himself at Tenzo, who didn't even blink as he caught boy's punch before tossing him against the wall. You really have pride issues, Tenzo commented and pulled himself closer one of the chairs that were in the room. The room is locked, I have the key and I won't let you out until I'm satisfied with your answers to my questions. Sasuke managed to sat up and wiped the blood trickling down his chin. What questions? He asked and spat out some blood onto the floor. He then folded his arms in front of himself and looked at Tenzo with as much pride and arrogance as he could muster. About the team, the village and Itachi, Tenzo said and then looked at Sasuke. Just so you know, I have been in ANBU. I worked with the people from TI. If I want to, I can beat you to death and nobody will be able to tell it was me. It isn't a threat, just a suggestion that you behave. Hokage-sama wouldn't accept that I was killed, Sasuke coolly said and Tenzo nodded in agreement. He would demand the head of one that killed me. Yes, Tenzo said and wondered if he should praise the brat for a bit of ability to think. Then he decided against it. For that the time would come later. But again, thugs were known to pick on genin. Some nuke nin could have always found you. Trust me, if I want you dead I will find a way to dispose of you. And what will I get if I work with you? Perhaps a chance to kill Itachi, Tenzo said and then allowed himself a smile. Or maybe become one of the greatest shinobi of your generation? Team 7 isn't a random team. The Sannin, Sandame Hokage and Yandame Hokage, Sasuke said after a moment of thought. All of them were from this very team. Yes. You have potential to become another great shinobi. At this Sasuke looked up. But your attitude and behavior makes me wonder if you even realize how much diligence and determination and camaraderie is needed to reach the heights of your potential. Why would I need people to become a powerful shinobi? Name me a single shinobi from those that you have mentioned that didn't have any support from their team. Sasuke sat for several long moments on the cold floor, unable to form a single sentence of an answer, as he slowly realized that there was no answer. No good answer. He opened his mouth, but then closed with an audible click. Yes, Tenzo said and then sat down, opposite of Sasuke. Each of them became whom they were because of teamwork and camaraderie. On your own a genin might take on a weak chunin, a genin team might take on a jonin and walk away alive. Senju Hashirama, Shodame Hokage, taught the shinobi that it isn't the individual power that matters, but the will of fire, and that the village is a family. Why do you tell me? Because you need to understand that even if you hate your team, Tenzo said and didn't miss the tension that flickered through Sasuke's body at the mention of the team. You need them to achieve your goals. Let's talk about your team. What can you tell me about Naruto? Has his insane amounts of chakra, but lacks any tactical thinking or the intelligence to plan a more effective solution, Sasuke said and frowned. His usage of clones can be impressive. Tenzo nodded and pulled out a small scroll. You are mostly right about Naruto, he said and considered his next words. Why do you think that he has such a poor understanding of tactics? Sasuke wanted to yell that it was because Naruto was stupid, but something in the behavior of Yamato put him on edge and told him this was not an answer that would be rewarded. I don't know, he finally said. Because some morons that shouldn't have been shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato sabotaged his education, Tenzo said and allowed himself a faint smile. They did it skillfully enough that nobody can pin the blame on them. Which doesn't change the fact that for a reason I cannot tell you, they sabotaged his education. Sasuke closed his eyes for a moment, and took several deep calming breaths. I still don't trust you and think you won't teach me much, he said, almost spitting out those words. But what you said makes some sense in my mind. I don't expect you to trust me, not now anyways, Tenzo said and got up. All I expect now is obedience, and that you will control your behavior. I won't teach you any new jutsu now, but we will work on skills that are equally important or should be. Assuming you want to ever beat your brother. Kakashi landed with Naruto next to the sculpture of fire on the Konoha cemetery, and then looked at the genin at his side. What I'm about to show you is for you only, Naruto, Kakashi said quietly as he walked through the cemetery. You can share it with the team, but nobody else. Why? Because while it isn't any kind of secret, Kakashi said as he smiled at Naruto, it is something that can be dangerous, and some of us dislike being reminded about certain events from our history, especially of how did we fail our allies during the events that started the Second War. Naruto blinked at this and looked at Kakashi in some surprise. He rarely saw his sensei being so open about something. You have a clan, Naruto, Kakashi said and then grimaced, wincing painfully at the memories, or rather had before it was killed at the beginning of the Second War by several villages that didn't want them to support Konoha. Naruto's eyes widened at this and Kakashi only nodded, the gesture slow and timid, yet showing some emotions. Yes, your clan was so feared that other villages decided they didn't want to face you in fair combat. Well, as fair as any ninja battle is, and instead attacked without any forewarning. Kakashi silenced Naruto and walked out of the cemetery and towards a monument showing a simple red spiral. It was built when we learned that the village of your clan, Uzumaki no Sato, was destroyed, Kakashi said, and fell silent for several long moments. This is as much as certain people would have been comfortable with you knowing. However, I spoke with the Sandaime, and he agreed that I should show you some more. Naruto looked unsure at Kakashi. Not that the Jonin was surprised much. This was the first time when anybody told this kid anything about his family, and the fact that he had a clan. Some saw Naruto as a weapon, some saw him as a demon incarnate, and some as a problem that wasn't their problem to solve. And none of them had the capacity to treat Naruto as a shinobi that could be their greatest ninja in few dozen years if only given some other attention that hate and dislike the Konoha given him. Yes, Kakashi said quietly as he patted Naruto on the shoulder. You had a clan, Naruto. However, this name was given to you by the Hokage to conceal you from his enemies. It is the name of the clan of your mother. At this, Kakashi visibly winced, memories of his sensei and Kushina-sama rushing forth. She was a lover of a shinobi that had as many enemies, if not more, than has the Sandaime, or other Kage. Whom was he? Naruto asked, his voice cracking from emotions. Kakashi smiled and ruffled Naruto's hair. I will tell you before the Chunin exams. Now come with me, he murmured and guided the younger shinobi back into the cemetery, and then into the part where important shinobi were buried. The grave of your mother, he murmured, brushing the dust off the gravestone. Uzumaki Kushina. Naruto nodded and stood by Kakashi's side, looking at the gravestone with the name of his mother engraved. He never really had the family, nor anybody else that would love him. The closest to that was the Sandaime, but it wasn't a normal relationship that a kid would develop with their parents. Kakashi's eye wandered to one of the closest graves, but then he suppressed this urge and looked once more at the grave of his sensei's wife. She was like his own mother to him for several years, and he felt like he failed her during that fateful night. Kakashi shook his head and then looked at Naruto. Stay here for as long as you want to. Once done, go to our usual training ground, he said, and added in a more cheerful voice. I need to retrieve some things buried in one of the armories of the village. Enko hurled another kunai and cackled when Sakura screamed as she heard the weapon fly towards her. The girl was loud, that much Enko could give her. Beyond that, so far she couldn't say anything. She didn't run fast, well, until Enko didn't start to toss kunai and shuriken in her wake. You will lose your voice if you keep being so loud, Enko yelled as she landed on a branch and watched Sakura. 20 more minutes and we will have a break. I can't keep going anymore, Sakura said as she stopped. Enko looked at the quivering and shuddering body of her student and frowned. The academy students could run more than this. I never really trained properly. Enko muttered several foul words under her breath and wanted to skin Kakashi, but then she sighed and looked at Sakura. 5 more minutes, Pinky. After that we will do something else. Sakura bit her lower lip and took off into the forest, leaving Enko alone for a second. The girl was an enigma. She was a fangirl, yet she was so much smarter than that. Enko couldn't understand why did she even become such a fangirl in the first place. She ought to be smarter than an average kid, yet she became a fangirl. Enko leaped after Sakura, and as she hurled another kunai towards the Pinky, she realized one thing, that the girl was from civilian background and that she could have been pushed towards being a fangirl by her parents. Or just she had bad ideas when she enrolled into the academy. Many girls wanted to marry shinobi from the clans because it meant influence, prestige, and money. In case of the clans that were old, like Senju, Uchiha or Hyuga, the amount of influence and money was insane. That could explain it, Enko said as she hurled yet another kunai. She thinks that she looks good enough and some rich ninja will notice and marry her. Then the purple-haired kunoichi scoffed. As if they cared only about looks and it was so simple for them to marry. Especially if they're from the clans. She wanted to strangle Kakashi for being so moronic and not making the kids realize how the world of shinobi looked. Yet she knew she couldn't quite blame him. While the academy was a cuddly place, some kind of impression of the world should have been passed on to them. Unless Sakura was too focused on being a fangirl that it flew past her. But then she was supposed to be smart. Enko landed next to Sakura and gave her a look full of pity. The girl's clothes were a torn mess. Kunai and shuriken did their job after all, showing her that perhaps it was a time to consider a change. Physically she wasn't much better, bruises, scratches and a couple of cuts. Even if Enko didn't try to actually hit the girl. I don't think that I need to tell you that you are a wreck physically, do I? Enko asked, and Sakura shook her head in a manner that told Enko more than she expected. The girl wasn't tired, she was plain exhausted and probably wanting to just collapse. Good, that's what we're gonna work for the next several weeks or months. Also, girly, did you think what do you want to specialize in? No, Enko-sensei, Sakura said and gave Enko a very weary smile. In the academy they didn't tell us what are the options, because they shouldn't have, Enko said, and Sakura blinked. The academy is mostly to weed out those completely unsuited to the role of the shinobi of Konoha. Then it is up to you and your sensei, in this case me and Kakashi, to grow and develop, and in our case to help you in it. Sakura nodded, leaned back against the tree trunk and started to clean her injuries. Tomorrow, once you're less ragged, Anko said and sat down looking into Sakura's eyes. I'll tell you what are your options and what would I suggest. Now however, tell me about your family. Marino Ibiki was not a name many shinobi wanted to hear and even less wanted to know that he paid them any attention. At best it meant stress, at the worst imprisonment, or outright execution. Konoha valued its teamwork, but it even more hated traitors and those that plotted against it. Nobody was outside of his reach and nobody could feel safe when his attention was attracted by some group. However, for once most of the shinobi was blissfully unaware of his activities and probably happy that someone else was the one that attracted his attention and ire. As at best it meant just disrupted operations and administrative problems, assuming nothing was found. Placing a stack of papers on his desk, Ibiki sat down and looked at them. The documents were incomplete, and he knew that. Yet he knew that the missing pieces for once were out of his reach as they were held by Danzo, and the last thing he wanted was to ask that thrice-damned mummy for help. The chance that he would receive what he asked for was slim, and the chance that he received something that would damn several Konoha shinobi was high. Danzo was a slimy being and one whose goals rarely aligned with those of the Hokage, yet never strayed too far away. Just the means did. Long ago Danzo was an idol for Ibiki. The Uchiha massacre changed everything. It was that bastard that ordered elimination of the whole Uchiha clan. Just because majority decided to carry out a coup. Ibiki heard the lock in the doors of his office open, croak and groan, and as he looked up they opened. Yamanaka and Noichi walking through. Who is our target this time? Danzo, Ibiki said and waited for their patriarch of the Yamanaka clan to sit down. Well, the Hokage wants him scared and the root chased back into deeper shadows. Not an easy thing, Inoichi muttered. He is skilled and knows how we operate. And has spies everywhere. Including our people. Ibiki nodded and looked at the files between them. I'm quite curious how many NBU are his, he said and allowed himself a grim smile. If they're clear, then we can clean our house. NBU can do more and nobody asks them strange questions. People fear them, Inoichi said as he took the first file from the list. They fear them and know that they are being watched if they see NBU. While we seem like your average shinobi and not so dangerous. That is also true. Ibiki nodded and then smiled. The Hokage also suspects that Orochimaru might be up. That snake is up to something. Always. He can't stomach the fact that he wasn't chosen as the Yondaime, and since then he is bitter that Konoha ignored him and his talents. There are also his experiments, and the things he had done. What experiments? Ibiki asked looking up. I never saw the documents about them, because all was destroyed on the orders of the Hokage, Inoichi said and paused for a second. As I think about it, Danzo could have gotten a hold of some of them, and for sure he acquired at least a single subject. Yamato. Inoichi said and allowed himself a smile. Kakashi did Konoha a service when he managed to pull Yamato out of the root. If he stayed there, he would have been an assassin almost impossible to stop and powerful enough to fear, even by Kage. Now he can serve the Hokage and be an uncomfortable dagger pointed at Danzo's back. Could he kill the old warhawk? Ibiki mused loudly. If my suspicions are right, killing Danzo will be a problem, Inoichi said and frowned. But he should be able to wound him enough for someone else to finish the job. That aside, what do you think about Team 7? They're a trouble magnet, Ibiki said and laughed. I will be surprised if they stay out of troubles during their training. The son of the former Hokage, the heir of the Uchiha clan and a civilian. They will attract all kinds of attention. Nobles, other Kage, bingo books creators, nuke nin, bounty hunters. The scarred Jonin shrugged. The question is, how much can we limit their exposure to this kind of attention? Kakashi doesn't help, Inoichi said with a wince. Granted, he was the only logical choice to teach the Uchiha, but the amount of bounties on his head, and whom is his sensei won't make our job easier. Actually it might help us, Ibiki said and smiled at the confusion he could see in the eyes of Inoichi. He is an ex-NBU, he knows how to catch the spies and keep them away, so most will stay a safe distance away. Getting caught spying on a team is not the best outcome. After all, we would be very curious as to why. Ibiki finished with a cold, predatory smile. Yamato looked at Sasuke and then looked at the scorched log in front of the Uchiha. The Katon Jutsu wasn't as strong as he expected, but it was adequate for this age group. It also hinted that the boy didn't do any elemental manipulation training. Not bad, Sasuke-kun, Yamato said, and the Uchiha looked at him, before nodding. I know that as a Uchiha you need to know this jutsu because it is that of your clan and Katon is your affinity. But did you do any elemental manipulation exercises? I was supposed to start, but then, the massacre happened, Yamato finished with a nod. That will be something to work on. Same as maybe a new jutsu or two. At the word jutsu Sasuke's eyes shone and it put Yamato on edge. Immediately. He could feel the hunger for power in the gaze and he knew where this could lead. So perhaps it was a time to keep access of the boy to new jutsu limited. Only when I deem that you are less hostile towards your peers, Yamato added after a moment of consideration. He then smiled and looked at the sun. I read the report from your last mission and I know that you managed to wake up your dojutsu. The Sharingan. Yes, sensei, Sasuke said, not a single trace of emotions in his voice. I did it when I and Naruto fought against Haku. That boy that used Hayaton. You won't use it when training with me, Yamato said and silenced Sasuke's outburst with an angry look. Yes, it is a powerful tool. But you need to know how to fight without it. Why? Uchiha's strength is the Sharingan. Yamato smiled at this. Activate it and try to stop me. Sasuke nodded, and the moment his eyes became red and black of the Sharingan, Yamato dropped several smoke bombs onto the ground and hurled himself. The smoke on its own was not an issue for the Sharingan, bright flashes that accompanied it. Yamato's hand moved and smashed into Sasuke's jaw. His head jerked backwards and he was thrown out of the smoke. He smashed into the long he previously scorched and finally stopped moving. Bright light can be your curse, Yamato said with a smile. Bright light, at night, that's even worse. Your eyes are attracted by flashy things. If your enemy knows you have Sharingan, they will throw a lot of flashy things and bright. Just to hurt your eyes and force you to close them. Sasuke groaned and slowly he got up. He blinked as tears streamed out of his abused eyes. You could have warned me. You wouldn't have learned, Yamato said and then smiled. At least for what I have next in mind you won't need your eyes. He walked to a nearby tree and looked at its trunk. I heard that Kakashi showed you how to walk up and down a tree. I don't trust him. So Shammi, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, stood on the roof of his office and looked at the village stretching in all directions. Finally, 12 years after the Kyuubi was unleashed on the 10th of October, the village mostly recovered. The dead wouldn't be replaced for the generations to come, but the scars healed and people mostly forgot about the whole ordeal. He took the hat after the death of Minato because someone needed to step up and take the heavy and unforging mantle for themselves, and he was the best choice as the interim Hokage, to see the village recover from the worst of the damage. Now, however, 12 years passed and he once again felt a burden of leadership, a burden that should be taken by the younger generation. Yet there was not a single shinobi that could take it. Kakashi was scarred by war, Tsunade too. Jiraiya was too precious outside of Konoha, roaming the lands and gathering the information, which didn't leave him with too many other choices. Out of the clan heads, the only one that came to his mind was Shikaku, cold and analytical, but also flexible enough to hold the position. Minato had been an ideal candidate for the title, strong and an intelligent shinobi that was respected by other ninja nations and daimyos. Yet he died so young, and that left Hiruzen with no choices for the successor. He should have been watching the shinobi closer, looking for an heir that could take the hat when the time was right. Now he needed to do it in a hurry. He was not getting any younger and the death would come, sooner or later. And there was always Danzo, always hungry for power. Still sore that Tobirama-sensei didn't name him the Hokage. The hunger in Shimura Danzo was a thing that unsettled Hiruzen. His old teammate was a being that was like Orochimaru, just much smarter and more experienced. So even if he did something highly illegal, the chance that there was evidence to find was almost non-existent, and the route was useful at times. Kakashi walked through the high halls of one of the underground arsenals built before the Second Shinobi World War. It had been since then stacked with dozens of thousands of kunai, shuriken and multitude of other weapons and armor used by the shinobi of Konoha. Its location deep underground prevented it from being discovered by most spies, and in cases of extreme emergency it could be used to protect the civilians. However, none of those weapons weren't his target at the moment. He was here for the personal possessions of the former Hokage. Getting the Sandaime to agree to his request took some time, but it ought to be worth it. Well, that was what Naruto would believe. In truth, Kakashi ignored what the Hokage told him. There was a time for thinking and there was one for action. Now it was the second, and he needed some push for Naruto to really focus. Giving him jutsu was pointless as he lacked the finer understanding necessary to use them safely. On the other hand, giving him some information about the past was much safer and less burdened with immediate risk. He was more than aware of the possible bullseye he was painting on Naruto's back, but at the same time he didn't have much to lose. With that gloomy thought, Kakashi stopped in front of the armored door barring him access, and pressed his palm against the cold steel of the door. If his access as ANBU captain wasn't removed, he would enter. If it was, then he would be lucky to lose his hand. Kakashi was more than aware of the possible bullseye he was painting on Naruto's back, but at the same time he didn't have much to lose. With that gloomy thought, Kakashi stopped in front of the armored door barring him access, and pressed his palm against the cold steel of the door. If his access as ANBU captain wasn't removed, he would enter. If it was, then he would be lucky to lose his hand. For a second nothing happened. The steel as cold as it should be, then a pattern became visible. Lines of ink exploded from his hand and spread over the whole surface of the door before briefly flashing blue. A lock clicked somewhere inside and the door opened. A wave of stale air rushed, and once it passed him, Kakashi entered. The things stored here usually weren't known to even highly trusted and experienced jonin. They were the personal belongings of the current and former Hokages, and Kakashi was pretty sure that several of them went missing in recent years. Of course, those were just his suspicions and he could be wrong, but he trusted them more than he trusted several of his fellow shinobi. He shook his head, chasing away the thought, and focused on the task at hand. It would be bad enough on its own. He never really came to terms with the fact that he failed his sensei on that night, and what he would find would make all of those things rear their ugly heads. He squashed those thoughts, and then pushed them aside as he stopped in front of one of the many chests and other containers thrown onto the shelves, and between them, there was seemingly no order to the madness. However, it was mostly to fool thieves that somehow managed to enter the vault. He kneeled and brushed aside the dust and cobwebs that covered the lacquered wood with a spiral visible in the middle of it. "Let's hope they didn't put their devilish seals on it," Kakashi murmured as inspected the lock and started to pick it. Lockpicking was one of the skills that all of the ANBU seemed to possess, and after a second Kakashi was done with the last barrier between the content of the chest and him. He slowly lifted the lid and smiled under his mask at what he found. Several scrolls on ceiling were a useful thing, but not now. Not until Naruto was better at the basics, and had some kind of self-control. What one could do with seals was too dangerous and powerful to be given to a green genin. A green genin that had their education sabotaged because several people were biased towards him. Kakashi muttered a choice of foul words under his breath and continued rummaging. A thick scroll with the sign of the Uzumaki clan was what he was looking for. Their Kekkai Genkai should be waking up any time soon, and the sooner Naruto knew what it was, the better. The chains were at best an annoyance, and at worst an extremely lethal weapon that laughed at most of the attempts to counter it. In the times when survivors of the Uzumaki clan were more common, the way of defending against them was taught. Now, Kakashi allowed himself a grim, satisfied smile. Now, not many jonin would know how to deal with a pissed-off Uzumaki that wanted their heads. If Naruto got the hang of the basics before the exam started, Kakashi didn't want to imagine what kind of trouble the other genin would be. If they had any kind of sanity, they would drop whatever was that Naruto wanted and run in the opposite direction. If they fought him with the chains already flying around, they were incredibly stupid and unlucky. Kakashi had enough nightmares of Kushina-sama using her chains against him in more heated spars, and he didn't want to ever again face them. Granted, Naruto wouldn't have the same proficiency for years, but against a genin any chain would be enough. Kakashi shook his head, getting his thoughts back to the content of the chest, and after pulling out the scroll, a small bundle wrapped in silk cloth revealed itself. He pulled it out and unwrapped. A chikuto in a black lacquered wooden scabbard revealed itself, and Kakashi knew it was what he looked for. "Now, just need to teach him how to use it, and he will be a problem," he said, and locked the chest. The rest Naruto could get when he was older. With those found, Kakashi slipped out of the vault and locked the door behind himself. Only to find the Sandaime Hokage waiting for him. "The seal that acts as a lock informs the current Hokage," the Sandaime said, looked at Kakashi and then at what Kakashi was holding. "I suspected that you would ignore me and try to take those." Kakashi shrugged and looked at the Hokage. "He needs the push, and out of all of the things I could find, those are the safest and best to give him." The Hokage hummed and extended his hand. "Give me the scroll," he said in a tone that left no room for arguments. Kakashi hesitated for a second, but then relented and handed it over. He knew he was out of his league here. He could kill any Kage, maybe Bart Tsuchikage, if allowed to take his time and prepare for the mission. In a straight-up fight he didn't stand a chance. "He will need it," the Hokage said after a moment. "Did he unlock the Kekkai Genkai?" "Not yet, Hokage-sama," Kakashi said. "I think, however, that it will happen soon. Maybe in the next few weeks. It might be due to his bad chakra control that he wasn't able to manifest those chains, or because he didn't know and didn't believe he has a Kekkai Genkai. That could have been a reason," the Hokage mused quietly. "The mind is a powerful thing, and I feared that if I mention it to him he can dig out things he shouldn't have found at his age, like the piles of corpses of those that wanted him dead?" Kakashi asked coolly, ignoring the anger of the Hokage. "Oh, I don't mean the civilians and the ninja, just those few thugs that were hired because someone decided they don't like him. Or because they thought that he would have been a good addition to their forces." The Hokage tensed for several moments, where Kakashi was sure that the aged leader would attack him. But then Shinobi no Kami nodded and relaxed. "Yes, among other things that I believed he wasn't ready for. He should have learned it when he was enrolled into the academy," Kakashi said, and then I smiled. "However, Hokage-sama, if you allow me, I will be able to repair some of the damage done, and he should grow into a powerful shinobi." Jiraiya frowned as he read a message given to him by a monkey sent by his sensei. He never expected the sensei to actually act so decisively, and so fast. And it seemed that he was more sane than Jiraiya gave him a credit for, a pleasant surprise for once. "So he expects the snake to do something," Jiraiya murmured and smiled. "Means that it is a time to take a look at Ta no Kuni." He then looked at the monkey and smiled. "You wait for any messages I'll have for Sarutobi-sensei?" "Yes, Jiraiya-sama," the monkey said. "Tell him that I will visit the small countries on my way to Konoha and give him more details, and say 6 weeks once I will be in Konoha." The summon disappeared and Jiraiya sighed. He really ought to see his godson, but the duty to the village came first, and the smaller countries surrounding Konoha were always a dangerous place. After serving as a battlefield for 3 major wars and dozens of smaller skirmishes, the inhabitants didn't love Konoha much, and while in theory Taki and Kusa were in a way allied to Konoha, they weren't real allies. And if given a suitably convincing opportunity, they could flip allegiances and stab Konoha the moment it looked not at them. For all the disgust and hate Jiraiya felt for his former teammate, he needed to agree that Orochimaru was shrewd and charismatic and slimy, just like a snake, a thing that made him so dangerous and unpredictable. And at the same time so charming in the strange way. A thing that worked against Konoha now, and Jiraiya wasn't very happy about it. "They hate us," Jiraiya said and looked towards the horizon. "They hate all of the great villages for the wars we waged on their soil, and nobody did a thing to help them recover after the last war." He shook his head in disgust and started to walk towards the first stop, Kusagakure no Sato, the village that in theory was the closest to Konoha and didn't actively oppose it in the past. He had a tiny sliver of hope in his heart that they would remember about the alliance, and wouldn't be willing to work with Orochimaru. The reasonable part of his mind told him that the moment they saw anybody wanting to have a revenge against Konoha, they would join. The grudges and pain took a long time to heal, and the memories and scars of the last war were still fresh in the memories of most leaders. A thing that would take a really long time to be forgotten, and a thing that could be exploited extremely easily by someone as charismatic as Orochimaru. Ibiki sighed as he finished reading last document, and looked at the pile of notes he and Inoichi made about most of the ANBU. He had higher expectations about some of those ninja. Out of the 800 active ninja in all of the ANBU squads, 10 were plain and obvious spies, while data on 13 more was so spotty it raised dozens of red flags in Ibiki's mind. 23 spies, Inoichi said. I expected some more of those with spotty data. I bloody know that Danzo has access to every single file, but still. He can't be that good. More will reveal themselves once we crack down on those we found now, Ibiki said and frowned. I will talk with the Hokage, and once he gives go-ahead we will begin. His teammate might have something to say. Especially if the people we found are on his payroll. If he is stupid, he will move, Ibiki said and then smiled. But if he is smart, he will hunker down and hope we don't see him. Political consequences are bad enough for him as is. The more motivated we are to dig, the worse it will be. He has a lot of skeletons in his closet, Inoichi said and sighed. If we mess up, the Hokage will skin us alive. Probably half of the experiments of Orochimaru are connected to him. Uchiha clan mess and many more. Ibiki nodded and gathered his notes before stalking out of the room. The talk with the Hokage was going to be a tough one. Even if he had the trust of the Hokage, Danzo was a teammate of Hiruzen, and usually most ninja trusted their team first, then everybody else. And more often than not had issues accepting that their teammates could do something so hideous as plot against the village or scheme against them. While there was no concrete evidence of the second, of the first, Ibiki had more than enough of evidence. Most of which wasn't very concrete, but more than what he had would be a miracle. We are too damn good at hiding our tracks, he muttered darkly. Even when I want to find someone, I cannot pin them down. Being the head of torture interrogation came with several perks, one of which was an unrestricted access to the Hokage, so when Ibiki appeared in the tower he wasn't barred access, even if several nobles and merchants waited for their time to speak with the leader of the village. He ignored their glares and walked into the office, where the presence of the advisors of the Hokage was an unpleasant annoyance. Hokage-sama, Ibiki said with a nod of his head as he completely disregarded Koharu and Hamura. He never really trusted them, and his suspicions suggested that they were up to something. I have some grave news, for your ears only. Whatever you want to tell the Hokage, you can also tell us, Yudatane Koharu said, and Ibiki glared at the elder woman. We advise the Hokage on all matters of importance. Ibiki regarded her with silence for few precious seconds before allowing himself a cold, unpleasant smile. Even on those regarding your missing teammate? He asked after a second and smiled when Koharu and Midokado Hamura, second advisor, recoiled as if struck by some insult. Ibiki, don't insult my advisors, the Hokage said, and Ibiki nodded, bowing his head in apology. I'm afraid that you need to leave us. Ibiki could see that the advisors wanted to argue, but after a few moments nodded and shuffled out. He could have played it more gently, without making them angry at him and without forcing the Hokage to act, but he didn't have the patience for it. What did you find, Ibiki-kun? The Hokage asked as they were alone. The ANBU guarding the Hokage also gone, as well as those that watched over the safety of his advisors. And why do you think that my advisors plot against Konoha? I didn't say that they plot against Konoha, Ibiki said, and then placed all of the notes he made on the desk. I just don't trust them not to babble about everything they will hear to Danzo. Do you think that they trust him more than they trust me? The Hokage said as he reached for the notes Ibiki made. That they would scheme against me. I don't have any concrete evidence, Ibiki said and winced. I wish I had, but Danzo, for all of his sins, is an experienced shinobi that knows how to avoid getting caught. And I fear that what I so far found is only the tip of the iceberg, and that the worst things will be revealed once I can interrogate those that I found so far. He was always ruthless, the Hokage said and flinched. Tobirama-sensei didn't think he was a good person to be the next Hokage, and that rejection possibly made him even more ruthless. I trusted him, and he did the things Konoha could never acknowledge. Now he strayed too far from the goals of Konoha. I believe that most of the shinobi I suspect of being spies is answering to him, Ibiki said and considered his next few words extremely carefully. With Hokage-sama permission I will arrest all of them, and have Inoichi take a look at their minds. Hopefully some will be innocent, and the rest can be dealt with appropriately. You have my permission, the Hokage said. Next time you will have something to report. Send a Chunin or Jonin and make them notify me so that I can keep my advisors busy elsewhere. Of course, Hokage-sama, Ibiki said with a bow before shuffling out of the office. Naruto yawned as he looked at the sky. Kakashi-sensei told him to go to the training ground the Team 7 used and wait for him there. Patience wasn't Naruto's most known trait, and waiting for his sensei for hours wasn't an easy thing. Yet there was something that kept him waiting there. He couldn't name the thing that kept him there, however he managed to stay there awaiting the arrival of his sensei. who showed up almost 2 hours later with a thick bundle in his hands. I'm impressed, Kakashi said, and Naruto looked at him. You actually waited for me. Naruto looked at his sensei, a small burst of pride forming inside of him at the praise. Something made me wait for you, the boy said without lying, and Kakashi I smiled at him. Good, now come here, the jonin said as he kneeled on the grass and unwrapped the bundle. Placing something that looked like a sword next to a thick scroll, Naruto scrambled from the place where he was laying and almost ran to his sensei before coming to halt barely in front of the silver-haired jonin. What is it, Kakashi-sensei? All in due time, Kakashi said and took his time, looking at the sword and the scroll. There is much more to them than you can see. There is even more of your inheritance, but you aren't ready to receive more energetic parts of it. Though perhaps better would be calling them explosive and deadly. Naruto blinked in surprise and looked at his sensei, then at the things between them. What do you mean, sensei? Fuinjutsu, Kakashi said, slowly pronouncing the word. The art of sealing, the explosive notes you use on kunai are the most crude and basic example of the art. I know the basics of it, but I won't teach you anything. That will be a task of someone who needs to return to Konoha once they fulfill their current mission. Kaka-sensei, Naruto whined. Why can't you teach me it? Because I don't want to spend hours scrapping your remains from the ground, Kakashi stated flatly and sighed. Fuinjutsu is dangerous, even if someone has all the theoretical knowledge they need. Kakashi's eye could express emotions, yet at the reaction of his student he didn't have any idea what he could do or how should he react. He knew that the kid had the brains and the potential, just buried under meters of bad habits, lack of motivation and several other less than pleasant things. Give me a definition of chakra, Kakashi said. It is the energy that we use for jutsu, right? Naruto asked and made his sensei's sweat drop in exasperation. Yes, we do use it for our jutsu, Kakashi grumbled. And yes, it is a form of energy. But you didn't tell me anything about it. It is composed of two things, spiritual energy from the mind and the physical energy from the body. Or also called yin and yang. Naruto glared at him and Kakashi only shrugged. The kid would learn or he would be damned, and even if he was easygoing and friendly, there were ways to make him much less friendly and much more demanding. Naruto, Kakashi said quietly, all of his kindness gone. You have the potential and I know that you can be smarter than you show to be. I knew both of your parents, and one thing I couldn't tell about them was that they were dumb. So tell me, how much did you lie and fake things in the academy? Naruto stared wide-eyed at him and Kakashi allowed himself a smile under his mask. He got the reaction he wanted. The kid wasn't as dumb as he thought, and possibly a lot of his behavior in the academy was not a real thing. Granted, a lot of it was thanks to some chunin that should have sooner or later a date with Ibiki, but most likely not all. Do you really think that even if you can fool chunin at the academy? Kakashi said with some distaste. Most of which was given the spot because it was the only spot where they couldn't cause too much damage. You can fool someone like me? Naruto's eyes widened even more and Kakashi laughed at this. You want attention, Kakashi stated flatly and Naruto only nodded. And since you couldn't keep up with Sasuke, you decided to go down the route of I'm the worst, look at me. Naruto only nodded and Kakashi continued. And the teachers with what they didn't help you in getting better in any way. Though the fact that you actually graduated says something about you, as only a total idiot wouldn't pass the academy. Naruto stared at him, eyes widened and bright, making Kakashi think about a different situation from his own genin times when Namake's Minato, his beloved sensei, needed to deal with Obito. Kakashi felt as if Kami was laughing at him for being the best genin on his team, that it was not his trouble to explain the basics to his genin, one of which slept through and didn't pay much attention at the academy. That will take a lot of time to fix, Kakashi said and then looked at the scroll and the sword between them. That sword is the one used by your mother during the war, and as for the scroll, it describes the Kekkei Genkai of your clan, a thing called Kongo Fusa, chains made out of pure chakra that have multitude of uses on the battlefield and outside of it. What uses? Naruto asked, most of the mirth and happiness gone from his eyes, reminding Kakashi very much of Minato-sensei when he was musing on some jutsu, pinning your enemies to trees, skewering them, chasing them and so on, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Those are the ways your mother used them, or well, I saw her use them in this way. That's cool! Naruto exclaimed. And very useful, Kakashi added and stood up. However, now time to go back to basics. Chakra control. Shikaki yawned as he sipped his sake and looked at the shogi board placed between him and Inoichi. So, the NBU is as full of spies as I suspected? Less so, Inoichi said as he moved a piece across the board. Danzo is clever. Too clever even. Yet even he can make mistakes, Shikaku countered and pieces once more clicked across the board. Not a single plan is perfect, and no amount of preparations can see it finished. He is used to the fact that he is ignored by us. You and Ibiki probably unsettled him, and you know to what it leads. Patriarch of the Nara clan smiled. You study psychology more than I do, Inoichi said with a grim smile. Mistakes and accidents. Ones you would normally avoid. He moved his piece and looked at Shikaku. How soon do you think he will do something rash? Shikaku rubbed his chin and looked at the board. Hard to tell. He knows the game very well and knows that mistakes might hasten his fall. I think that he will wait for the moment when most of his agents Well, those he thinks we should be able to catch is arrested. Another piece was moved on the board and one removed as Shikaka sipped his sake. He is old and knows that the sooner he moves, the more we can tell about his whole network. What I would do if I were him would be to hide the assets I need and throw at us chaff, so that we chase false leads and he sits happy and smug, Inoichi continued. He knows all of our standard procedures and knows how to avoid them, so he will be a pain. A huge pain, Shikaka corrected with a small smile. And there are reports from several places that he isn't the only one that wants to cause chaos. Whew, hard to say, Shikaka said and yawned. Jiraiya-sama was sent to check several rumors. It's either our friend, Orochimaru, or someone else that also wants attention. That snake should have been beheaded long ago, Inoichi said and groaned. Why did Hokage-sama decide to let him live that time he was caught robbing graves? Because for all the toughness and ruthlessness Hokage-sama is capable of, he is still a kind and gentle man. And one that has too much trust in humans. A thing I never expected to say about a fellow shinobi, Shikaka said and refilled his cup with more sake. He is also tired by the burden of leadership. He is a great leader, but the amount of deaths he ordered and what happened to his wife drags him down. If he had a good successor, he would have stepped down ages ago. Speaking about shinobi, Inoichi said and studied the board before moving another piece. Sasuke-kun, as he is called by Ino, who the hell thought to allow him to graduate the academy? What do you mean? Shikaka asked with some genuine interest. Psych evaluation, Inoichi said and shrugged. That boy is an avenger bent on murdering his brother, shows psychopathic tendencies and has almost no respect for authorities. I didn't do it, but I saw it, and even Kakashi isn't that fucked up mentally. I wonder how I never saw this, Shikaka mused. I should have seen it since I am the current Jonin commander, and I can block such a questionable promotion. I guess they wanted their precious Uchiha promoted, Inoichi said and looked at the sake bottle. I can see why do you drink so much. The council is unhappy, Shikaka said and groaned. Their bickering at the best of times is irritating. Today it was headaches-inducing and apparently Hokage-sama told them to get lost and they didn't appreciate this gesture. Not that I am terribly surprised. I don't have much trust for them, and the further away they are from the most secret plans, the better. Speaking about that precious Uchiha, Inoichi said and Shikaka looked at him. Tenzo might be able to knock some sense into his head. If not, I might be forced to step in and take a more direct approach to the problem of the mentally unstable ticking time bomb, which might cool some heads, Shikaka said and mused quietly. And the exams are coming. 6 months from now we should host them, and the Team 7 will be supposed to bring fame and glory to Konoha, Inoichi said and grimaced. Inflating the ego of Uchiha even more. Kakashi cannot not submit them. If he did that, the council would have his head. Kakashi forgets politics, Shikaka said with a faint smile as he returned his whole attention to the board. He might do something unpredictable. Tenzo grunted as he caught Sasuke's strike and then hurled the boy backwards. He certainly hit hard and knew how to exploit even the smallest weakness. Not bad, Tenzo said and looked at the scrambling boy. You certainly are fast. I need to be fast to kill my brother, Sasuke said as he hurled a handful of shuriken and charged at Tenzo. I need to be stronger and faster than him. Tenzo didn't say anything. Instead he pulled out a kunai and deflected the coming shuriken. He then moved out of the way of Sasuke in the last moment, and sent a powerful kick towards his back. The boy barely managed to move mostly out of the way, but the strike still almost shattered several of his ribs. But don't think in combat, Tenzo said as he looked at his student. I could have used my ninjato and slice across the back of your knees. Or aim a kick at one of the knees. Sasuke glared as he slowly moved. His moves pained and slow, the pain visible in his expression. Why do you do this? He asked. That could have killed me. Because you think you are invincible and that your name is everything, Tenzo said and gave him a look. I can kill you in dozens of ways and you have no way of stopping me, yet you think that you can stand a chance against me. Wake up. Anko looked at Sakura and smiled as she played with her kunai. So, Pinky, what do you really know about shinobi? Anko asked and seeing the confusion, added. Well, outside of what the academy teaches. Not much, Anko-sensei, Sakura said. My family previously lived in one of the normal towns. Not in a hidden village. Oh, Anko said as she realized why Sakura was so clueless about some stuff. Well, you will have a crash course from me. Thing number 1, why do you think only 3 teams out of each class have any worthwhile sensei? Because we lack enough of experienced and trained jonin? Sakura guessed. Well, you are wrong, Anko said and smiled. We need cannon fodder. Cheap and expendable cannon fodder. One that we can spend cheaply and avoid too many political headaches when they die. That's cruel. That's life, girl, Anko corrected her. In some situations it is easier to sacrifice a team of genin instead of a team of chunin, or jonin, and not everybody is good enough to be promoted to chunin. In case of the 3 teams in each class, we believe that the genin that form them have the potential to be worthy, investing in their training and education. Even a village as rich as Konoha and with as many jonin as we have, still needs a substantial number of its jonin free at all times to carry out A-rank and tougher missions. The world of ninja is based on power and money. The more difficult the mission, the more money the village gets paid and the more prestige it has. As for power, the stronger the kage and jonin, the better. Training you, genin, to even a chunin level is not cheap. It pulls away our most experienced and famous ninja from doing the missions we get paid extremely well, and instead it saddles them with 3 kids they need to watch. It's a cruel and inhumane, Sakura said, shaking her head. Girl, be lucky you are not in Kiri, Anko said and shook her head. Their genin exam until few years ago was that you needed to kill your best friend. Or be killed by them. Here we don't kill genin. Well, not outright anyways, and we give you all time to develop. Just some have more of it. Why do you tell me all of this, Anko-sensei? To make you realize that our lives aren't all roses, Anko said and stood up. We lie, steal, kill as the Kage and daimyo wishes us. For most of the citizens we are heroes or monsters, depending on whom you ask. Yet we do things most of us isn't proud and in many cases can't even mention them to anybody. She dusted off her coat and looked at Sakura. Time for some exercises for you. At those words Sakura groaned as she stood up and looked expectantly at her sensei. Anko's ideas of physical exercises were at best grueling, and at the worst an outright torture. She had a reputation after all to maintain, and going soft on a genin was not a good option. Do those exercises I showed you yesterday, Anko said and smiled. Once we are done for today, I will invite yourself to your parents for a chat. What? Sakura sputtered as she crashed onto the ground. Just usual chit-chat with your parents, Anko said and shrugged. Doing something Kakashi should have done, but probably didn't because he is a lazy being. Kakashi watched as Naruto raced up and down the tree, over and over again. The boy had a lot of stubbornness and determination. 2 things that were of such a great use now. Dangle in front of his eyes a reward, and he would work day and night just to get it. For once life was good for Kakashi, letting him enjoy the fruits of his teaching and ponder what to do next. Perhaps it was the time to visit a blacksmith he trusted with the remnants of the family sword. If Naruto was getting a sword, someone needed to teach him the basics, and while he could probably ask Uzumaki Yugao to teach Naruto once he got the basics down, someone needed to teach him those basics. He shook his head and looked up the tree, to see the blonde once again race up the tree. With that exercise done, perhaps it was a time for Naruto to take a shot at water walking. It would certainly help him later on, and the chakra chains needed a nearly flawless, for an Uzumaki that is, chakra control. That's enough for now, Naruto. Kakashi yelled and the blonde dropped onto the ground. Time for you to learn something new. What is it, sensei? A jutsu? Naruto asked, hopeful excitement visible in his voice. No, Kakashi said, and seeing slumping form of Naruto, he added. Still, it is something cool. He walked closer to a nearby stream and Naruto followed him. Do you remember how I walked in Nami on the water? Naruto nodded energetically, making Kakashi smile. The verbal tic was the more obvious trait inherited by Naruto from Kushina, but his sheer energy and enthusiasm also came from somewhere. The principle is the same, Kakashi said as he walked onto the surface of the stream. The water, however, is a liquid body that changes as opposed to something solid like a block of stone or a tree trunk. While walking up a tree trunk you need a steady pulse of chakra. Here, I need to adjust it to the water and the way it changes, Naruto finished. Exactly, Kakashi said and then smiled. The more you train, the easier for you it will be to finally unlock your Kekkei Genkai, and once you do that I will show you a useful advantage of the Kage Bunshin. Kakashi watched his blonde student wobble on the surface of the water and allowed himself a smile. It was far from the desired result, but far better than the lack of skill some shinobi displayed. It also showed that perhaps for once he wasn't overestimating capabilities of his student. A loud yelp, followed by the sound of splashing water, corrected Kakashi's estimations. That last feat was an effect of luck and Kami being merciful, not skill. However, it was still a progress, and Kakashi hoped that in a week or so Naruto would figure it out. With that done, Kakashi mused as he rubbed his chin, his eye not focused on Ika, but on his student for once. Perhaps I should teach him Rasengan. He is possibly the only one of my students that can safely use it. And he is a son of Minato-sensei. Kakashi looked at the soaked form of Naruto that emerged from the stream and I smiled at him. 10 more minutes and you are free for today, he called out, only for his student to nod and once again try to stay on the surface. He is more stubborn than I thought, Kakashi said and looked at the sun that was slowly moving across the horizon. But that's not the worst trait to have. And for once he didn't complain about it being boring strange. The last 10 minutes passed uneventfully and excluding few times when Naruto took a bath Kakashi read his book almost undisturbed. The moment his student was gone he pocketed the book and returned to the memorial stone to pay his respects. Only to find the Hokage there, seemingly waiting for him. Hokage-sama, Kakashi said respectfully and the aged leader nodded at him. How is Naruto-kun, Kakashi? Kakashi looked at the Hokage with a raised eyebrow. He never expected this amount of interest from the Hokage. Unless suddenly Hiruzen remembered who was Kid's father. He has potential, Kakashi grounded out after a few moments. The potential and drive to maybe even surpass Minato. You realize that the more he becomes powerful the stronger the resemblance will be? I know, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said and frowned. I didn't have an opportunity to take a good look in the vault, but is there a chance that some Uzumaki clan clothing would be stored there? Kakashi could see some mirth in the eyes of the Hokage. Mirth and at the same time shrewdness he rarely saw. If he looks like Uzumaki the people will think that he is an Uzumaki, the Hokage said and chuckled. I don't think that most of the spies are that idiotic to be fooled by this. I wouldn't be surprised, Hokage-sama. However, I want to give him something that would let him discard the kill-me clothes he wears now. Not to mention, he needs more ties to his clan and the past that isn't tied to the village. Well, not to the village he knows, but the village we ought to have been to him. Hiruzen hummed quietly, the gaze of his eyes focused on the memorial stone, but then he slowly nodded. Very well, I will have several of the ANBU search the vault, he said after a moment. When Mito-sama came to Konoha, she brought with herself several members of her clan, so there should be something that could be useful. Kakashi nodded and focused his gaze on the stone. Hokage-sama, do you know when Jiraiya-sama will be in Konoha? Once he fulfills his mission. I cannot tell you more, Kakashi. Too much depends on it. Kakashi conceded here as he knew that they weren't alone, and him trying to press the point meant a meeting with the 4 ANBU hidden around the stone. Well, he only saw 4, while there were usually twice as many around any Kage at all times. Leave us, the Hokage murmured, and his shadows disappeared. The ANBU is filled with spies and Ibiki is eliminating them. Tonight. I noticed that some were skittish earlier today, Kakashi said and mused. It reminded me of a prey discovered in its hiding spot by a very hungry predator. The Hokage chuckled at this, making Kakashi arch an eyebrow. Nothing, Kakashi-kun. You're dismissed. Anko nimbly landed in front of Sakura's home, and then looked at her cute student. Cute and innocent student that was so unaware of how dark and grim the world of shinobi could be, and still thought that the world was mostly black and white, and not full of the shades of gray and darkness it truly was. Anko was more than painfully aware of it, but that was the boon of being an apprentice of Orochimaru. She still appreciated him for the things she learned from him, but he was not the holiest of men and his methods were ruthless and cold, and that made her see the world as an ugly and dangerous place much sooner than most of her peers. Possibly it was also a thing that made her be more acutely aware of the dangers that came with their job and what saved her from more than a single attempt on her life. Anko shook her head discreetly and cut that thought short. She didn't need to brood on how many people wanted her dead because of the contract she signed. At least thanks to being in the higher echelons of ANBU she could persecute them however she wished to, legal aspects be damned. Anko-sensei? Sakura asked quietly and the girl's voice snapped the snake summoner out of her musings. Nothing, Sakura, Anko said and indicated the door. You come first, Pinky. My name is Sakura, Sakura huffed, glaring at her sensei. Not Pinky. Anko smiled and nudged the girl, at the same time watching her behavior very carefully. She wondered how much she could glean from Sakura's behavior. The girl tensed and slowly moved to the door, as if Anko was a far bigger threat than her parents, or as if she was scared of what her parents would think if they saw Anko. Sakura nodded and opened the door before shouting. Ka-san! Tu-san! Anko stepped inside, not bothering herself with politeness and kindness. She was a shinobi and didn't need to bother with being nice or friendly. She could be more refined, but most of civilians didn't need it. They wanted her gone as fast as possible and with as little noise as possible, allowing them to return to their normal and average lives. Without shinobi issues thrown at them, Sakura's parents came and Anko didn't bother them with much attention. They were civilians that had almost no chakra, every being had the chakra, but only ninja had any worthwhile amounts. The amounts the civilians had were close to none and more importantly they couldn't mold it, making them almost non-existent threat for any ninja that could kill them with a single finger. Who are you? Sakura's mother asked without any formalities. And more importantly, what are you doing in my house? I'm temporary sensei of Sakura, Anko said and smiled. And since her permanent one didn't deign to show up and explain to you several important things that we usually explain to parents of new gen and well, I'm here and you will listen to me. Or what? Nothing, Anko said and allowed herself a wide smile. You see, Hokage-sama is a wise leader and thinks it's appropriate. Yes, that's the word, for the Jonin sensei of the teams to make the civilian parents of genin aware of certain things that can happen in our field of work. You can kick me out and that's your right, but I suggest that you listen to me. Fine, Sakura's mother grounded out. She looked at her husband and after a nod from him smiled more warmly. We will listen, Anko smiled at this. The gesture more genuine and honest than the previous wide smile that was akin to a snake smiling. Very well, Haruno-san, Anko said and paused for a moment, considering how much she should reveal. Knowledge was a precious bargaining chip and one that wasn't cheap. I'm Mitarashi Anko, Tokubetsu Jonin of Kanahigaku no Sato. Where do I work or what do I do? That's classified and you don't need to know it. Why, Mitarashi-san? Sakura's father asked as he indicated for her to go into what looked like a living room. I'll be blunt, Anko said and looked at Sakura. That will be a useful lesson for you too. Then she looked at Sakura's parents. In the last 6 months 10 people tried to murder me. Tried as in I managed to caught them in the act or I was told about them. I wouldn't be surprised if twice as many attempts were dismantled by the counterintelligence cells of our village, and I didn't know about them. At this Sakura's eyes widened perhaps even more than that of her parents. I'm an extreme case because of what I do and how hated by some very influential people I am. Usually a ninja avoids most of the assassins or never knows about them because they get caught before they have a chance to do anything. Very well, Sakura's father conceded. I used to live in the capital and I can say when one is lying to me. Yet you seem to be honest. I didn't omit many facts, Anko said with a smile and looked at Sakura. Considering the team Sakura was placed on, I think she might be a magnet for troubles. At those words Sakura stiffened, making Anko only chuckle. I don't mean you, nor your teammates really. The Team 7 is kinda special. What do you mean, Ninja-san? Anko smiled at this and looked at Sakura's parents. Let's see. 2 Hokage, the Sannin are the most famous ninja that were once a part of this team, Anko said and grinned. Enough said that if you are placed on this team, the higher-ups think that you are destined for greatness or are a worthy investment. Anko paused for a second and then smiled. However, that's less of a reason why I am here. So what is it? Sakura's mother asked after a moment. The future training of Sakura, Anko said and allowed herself a predatory smile. I was asked by her nominal sensei to train her, and since the life of shinobi is harsh and unforgiving I will push her as hard as my sensei did when I was his student. She considered her words for a second and then nodded. Yes, that sums up what I plan to do. She has the potential and just needs a shove in the right direction. What do you mean, Anko-sensei? Sakura asked, some fear in her voice. That you need as much training as you can manage, Anko said flatly. For reasons way above even my pay grade, the higher-ups want you to compete in the next Chunin exam. I think that you can pass, you just need enough training so that you know what you need to know. Do you think that our daughter is ready for the exams? Sakura's parents asked as one, making Anko chuckle a bit. I think she will be when they will come around in 6 months, Anko said and grinned. I will be damned if she isn't ready by then. I can make her ready and will make her ready. What it involved was not for their ears, so Anko didn't bother mentioning anything about it. She needs hard work, determination and diligence, but if she has all of that, she will be a Chunin after the exams. Thank you, Mitarashi-san, Sakura's mother said. We never expected someone to care so much about the education and training of our only child. I only do my duty, Anko said before getting up and slipping out of the house. Only to be met by an ANBU. What? She asked with a hiss. Ibiki Taishu wants you to interrogate someone, the ANBU said and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Making Anko want to curse the coward, not that she blamed him. Her rage wasn't homicidal, that was the specialty of Hataki. Hers was more painful and drawn out. At least the prospect of having fun brightened her mood and made her a bit giddy even. If Ibiki wanted her to make whoever it was talk, they would be stubborn as hell and had an interesting amount of resistance to pain. Ibiki looked at the drawn-up plans of the Chunin exam and winced. Because of the current politician machinations that were above his pay grade, he needed to change the bloody thing. He sighed and glared at Shikaku, who looked as bored as ever. That trait of Nara, to look bored and sleepy when a thunderstorm was setting alight their house, was pissing off. Why did you suddenly pay interest to the exams, Shikaku? Ibiki asked without any pleasantries or false kindness. You normally don't pay any attention whatsoever. Because of reasons that are too troublesome to tell, Shikaku said and grimaced. They include the ANBU caught, and the agents Inoichi is having a chat with. And that warrants that you not take your usual nap and instead descend into the pits of the TI to plan the next Chunin exam? Ibiki snorted. I didn't know you as a kind and outgoing being. Shikaku rolled his eyes and let out an annoyed sigh. It is not every day that every foreign village plots against you, he said and looked at Ibiki as shadows around them became awake. Cut the crap, Ibiki. I have an appointment with the Hokage in the next 4 hours and want to tell him something more than we're still finding where our asses are. It's not every village, Ibiki corrected him. Kiri is sensing us for an alliance, Kumo is Kumo and IWA sits on its ass, far away and out of the way of any future conflict we might have with our neighbors, which leaves Suna, Aim, Taki, Kusa and Odo, Shikaku said counting the villages with his fingers. 5 villages, against 1. Those aren't great odds. They're still not terrible, but not great either. Third war was worse, Ibiki said. We had 7 villages to deal with, 5 of which were demolished when they killed Yuzu, Shikaku said with a wince. So what do you plan to do? Ibiki asked with an impish smile that could fool many, yet Shikaku was not one of them. You are a Nara, a freaking genius that has a plan and a scheme when he needs it. Do a stupid thing, Shikaku said and grinned. Invite IWA, Kumo and Kiri to the exams. Have them send as many teams as we can bribe them to send. The more ninja from other villages are at home, the less likely they are to do something stupid out of the fear of doing something that can kill other foreign shinobi. We planned what? Ibiki murmured as he reached for one scroll. 50 teams give or take 5, most of which would be ours, Shikaku said and pursed his lips, making the scars covering his head even more pronounced. I was thinking invite 20 teams from each of the other major villages. 10 from each of the minor ones and perhaps 60 teams from our forces. 60 teams? We don't have that many of the elite teams in rotation for that. We would need to send some of our cannon fodder into the exam, and we do not send them in because of what they are. And they're the currency we need to pay to dismantle most of the political mess we're faced, Shikaku said and snorted. If someone is planning something big, they will carry it out in the last phase, but they might do something stupid sooner, and clan heirs will all be taking part in it, Ibiki said and grimaced. I don't want to be the paranoid one, more than usually, but if I wanted to cause problems, it would be during the second stage when we have the heirs without any ANBU handy to keep assassins away, especially if we invite Kumo, Hyuga incident, and their general hunger for bloodlines. It wouldn't be last them to seduce say our last Uchiha, and make him run away with them. Stranger things happened in the past. Shikaku rubbed his chin and looked at the map of the Forest of Death. The usual venue of the second stage. Do we have something else that's maybe even more deadly or can be made deadly? Probably one of the ANBU playgrounds, Ibiki said and shrugged. Some of them are mazes of canyons full of traps, poisonous and venomous animals and plants, and we could rig them with dozens more of traps. That is an idea, Shikaku said and frowned. I want something which we can contain and watch easily if need be. The Forest of Death is hard to check for troubles if we need to, and we need to rely on cameras for too much of the coverage. I could probably find a drug to spray there to make the participants very talkative and angry, Ibiki said, and Shikaku looked at him. The TI has many tools we don't advertise to the outside world. Sometimes an angry person has a very loose tongue, and if we are right about it, we will have a great number of moles to catch. The daimyo would need to be consulted, Shikaku said with a frown. One thing is to have a slaughter at the exams. That's a norm accepted by all. Having us knowingly poison the genin so that they spill the secrets of their villages is a bit too dicey. Even if it can work, Ibiki frowned and nodded. I suppose I could be more secretive about it, he said and smiled. There are ways to poison ones we think are interesting, like one eternal genin that has been recently seen close to the archives. Shikaku's eyes widened at this. He didn't dare to say the next words, as even if the headquarters of the TI was proof against most forms of spying and nobody should know that. He had a meeting here now. He was starting to get a bit paranoid. So far we have nothing on him, Ibiki said and growled. The noise putting Shikaku on edge, seeing the torture master, interrogator, so on edge was rare. He was always composed, loud and unfiltered at times, but calm. And most of the ANBU, that is clear, is doing more important things. Great, Shikaku said and snorted. Tell me that no more skeletons fell out of Danzo's closet. As far as I know, he only talked with the advisors about Hiruzen eliminating his spies. And they said that they would talk with our esteemed Hokage. Not that I predict them much in terms of a success. More like another humiliation. Ibiki nodded and then turned his attention back to the plans of the exam. I will have everything done by the end of the week, he said and then smiled. And probably even the most experienced genin will run away from the exam once they see the hell I can come up with. You know, our internal jonin exam could be scheduled at the same time and at the same place. Shikaku paled at this and gave Ibiki the best expression of annoyance and Nara could muster that wasn't in any way influenced by boredom. You want to cause an international incident? Hiruzen sighed and contemplated slapping his advisors across the room. He was very curious what dirty secrets made them come to his office and demand that he stops the investigation done by Ibiki. No, he said, and seeing their looks of shock allowed himself a smile. Ibiki has my full trust, and I see no reason to tell him to stop. In fact, his investigation already found several holes in our security protocols. At this the advisors gaped like fish and Hiruzen only mentally chuckled. Koharu, Hamura, tell me, what did Danzo do to make you come to my office and demand that I stop that investigation? We're just worried for the safety of Konoha, Hamura said, and Hiruzen arched an eyebrow in question. A number of ANBU has been arrested, and quite a few went missing. Because of security reasons, Hiruzen finished for his advisor. I trust you, I really do. But somehow Danzo learns of everything that happens when you two are around. He paused and looked at them. Do you serve the Hokage or our former teammate? They looked between each other, and then at him. Unsure what to do or how to even respond to that very obvious accusation of treachery. Leave this office, he said and closed his eyes for a second. Come in 2 days with an answer that will satisfy me. I am willing to give you a second chance, but the moment you stab me in the back, Ibiki is waiting, and he mentioned that he would love to play his mind games with you. Before he finished that sentence the advisors were gone. The only sign of their presence a disturbance in the air from a very quick and rapid shunshin. Good, they didn't forget that they are ninja, Hokage mused and looked at the village. It seemed that there was more to Danzo than he ever estimated. If he panicked so soon and made Koharu and Hamura try to step in and put a stop to the investigation, there really needed to be more to it. Hiruzen was aware that Danzo was working in the shadows, but he expected his former teammate to be maybe more skilled and less obvious than that. He sighed and shook his head before returning back to the paperwork. Sasuke flashed through the hand seals and didn't even call out the name of Jutsu before expelling another ball of fire. The training with Yamato-sensei was far less forgiving than Kakashi-sensei ever was, and he was even more demanding than the silver-haired Jonin. Good enough, Yamato called out, and Sasuke wanted to spit onto the Jonin for that comment. That guy didn't know when enough was enough and when the exercise was a torture and not an exercise. You improved, Sasuke. I needed, Sasuke shot back. You're trying to kill me every single day and night I train with you. Yamato shrugged and tossed a bakken, a wooden training sword used for kenjutsu training. You want to defeat Itachi. Kenjutsu is a thing you need to master, Yamato simply stated and reached for another. Sasuke groaned, his pained muscles calling for rest and a period to regenerate, but then he pushed past their instincts and moved, each second making him feel his whole body as if it was on fire. He blocked the first strike. The clash of wood on wood sending tremors down his whole arm as the world exploded into stars. For the second he didn't have the energy to muster to lift his sword and stop the wood from smashing into his side and cracking a rib. He let out a feeble sigh and dropped onto the ground. A pained expression on his face before the darkness came and claimed him. Naruto carefully balanced on the water, the chakra flowing from his feet in random and unpredictable bursts. It wasn't even conscious decision at this point, just one done on its own by the body as it kept him on the surface and prevented from taking a dive and finding himself all wet. He let out a shout of joy and jumped, barely managing to stay on the surface as he landed. Yada! I did it! Good job, Naruto, Kakashi-sensei said, and I smiled. Do you want to learn a jutsu developed by your father? At this, Naruto immediately became serious and looked at his sensei. What jutsu? Naruto asked, his eyes narrowed and none of the usual joy visible in them. Kakashi smiled and then extended his hand. A ball of pure chakra growing rapidly above his palm. Rasengan, he said and paused for a second. Sensei wanted to add elemental manipulation to it, but never had a chance before dying. Chidori and Raikiri that I developed were my attempts at finishing the jutsu. In this form it is still potent enough. Kakashi rammed his hand into a training post nearby and splinters flew in every single direction. What it did to this post is a mercy compared to what it can do to human flesh. Naruto gulped and nodded. In front of his mind flashing a scene of a human ramming that swirling ball of destruction into an exposed side of a human target. Yes, Kakashi nodded grimly. That's why you won't ever use it against a fellow Konoha shinobi. Never. This is not a weapon you can use on a fellow ninja, even in a spar. Naruto nodded glumly and Kakashi ruffled his hair before tossing him a bag of balloons. And at the confused look on his student's face he only laughed. That's the first step of learning the jutsu, Kakashi explained patiently. As you saw, there are no hand seals. Just chakra and shape of a sphere. You fill the balloons with water and try to make the water inside so chaotic that it pops the rubber. However, that is something you will do later on. Why? Kakashi smirked under his mask and Naruto wanted to punch him in the gut and wipe that smirk off his face. History lesson time, Kakashi said cheerfully. You know that the Kagebunshin makes a solid copy of yourself, right? Naruto nodded energetically. Now tell me, what can be so special about it that it is used as a scouting tool? Assuming that one using them has the necessary chakra. Naruto frowned as he tried to remember that time when he had the forbidden scroll in his hands. There was something strangely familiar ringing inside of his mind and then his eyes widened. The memories of the clone pass on to the original? Yes, but they come with a drawback. The more clones you use, the bigger the drawback, and I wouldn't suggest using more than 2 or 3 at times. The memories rushing into your mind take a time to be understood, and too many at once can be overwhelming. You are an Uzumaki and that means that killing you is troublesome. But even you have some limits, and you didn't mature enough to reap the full benefits. So if I use too many clones at once I'll suffer from a massive headache afterwards? Naruto asked with a frown. Or just knock yourself out, Kakashi said with a sigh. It just depends on you and how strongly you react. Some people get knocked out, some just have a migraine kind of a headache for a few hours. Naruto nodded and then grinned. This still means I can use 3 or so clones to learn Rasengan, while you teach me something else? Kakashi was speechless, and his jaw almost dropped in shock. Who would think that this kid could get so smart so quickly if he was just nurtured and prodded in the right direction? I will teach you something else, he said after a moment. Well, more of make you trigger something as Kekkai Genkai vary by clan and I don't know how to make your pop out. Huh, even if I saw your mother use the bloody chains, I don't have an idea how did she activated them, Kakashi explained with a sigh. I know how they're supposed to look, I know their purpose, but I don't know how they're triggered. I think it is related to how well you shape and control your chakra. But that is just a theory and since we don't have an Uzumaki handy, this is the best we have now. Naruto nodded and made 3 clones that he sent away to do that utterly boring and frustrating thing with the balloons, only to discover that the training with Kakashi wasn't much more entertaining as it mostly involved meditation and shaping his chakra into something that resembled a chain. It was grueling, cruel and unpleasant and far more boring than Naruto anticipated. Don't be so glum, Kakashi said with an eye smile. We still have 5 months and 3 weeks before the training ends. You don't need to manifest or even master your Kekkai Genkai in that time. Naruto let out a frustrated grunt and shoved his hand forward. It was a move driven by anger and a strange instinct that told him it was the right thing to do. A beam of blue and gold chakra shot out, barely missed Kakashi-sensei and stopped inside of a tree, behind him. Is that it? Naruto asked with a goofy smile. Why yes, Kakashi stammered as he eyed a chain that could have very easily pierced him. That's what I wanted to see. Your parents would have been proud of you, Naruto. Naruto beamed with pride and yanked his hand back. The chain ripped itself out of the tree in a shower of splinters and returned into his hand. Each of the links inscribed with strange glyphs and symbols and the tip shaped like a tip of a kunai, albeit with 3 prongs. Try to do it once again, Kakashi said and I smiled. But don't skewer me, Konoha Shinobi insurance policy doesn't cover getting skewered by massive chakra constructs. Does any village actually have chakra construct Kekkai Genkai accidents insurance? Naruto asked, trying his best to stifle the laughter. Not anymore, Kakashi said and paused. Kiri and Iwa have. Apparently they still have fresh memory of being skewered. Naruto laughed at the poor joke and focused on the same sensation he felt when the chain erupted out of his hand. He pointed his hand at a rock away from Kakashi and willed for the chain to shoot out. It did it and smashed into the rock, breaking it into hundreds of dangerously sharp shards. And after that Naruto's knees gave up under him, and he smashed onto the ground, his body exhausted by the awakening of his Kekkai Genkai, and the strain it put on the chakra coils. In a couple of years he would be able to manipulate several chains at once, but now all he could muster was a single one for several brief moments before passing out from the exhaustion and the strain put on his body. The Hokage entered the room in the hospital and looked at Kakashi. What did he do? He asked in exasperation, eyeing the passed-out form of Naruto. His Kekkai Genkai, Kakashi said and paused for a few moments. I didn't want to take any risks. I know well enough that this could have caused some traumas I didn't see or notice. The Hokage nodded and then noticed the two ANBU present in the room. Taking no chances with his security? His chakra coils are burned. He needs a day or so of rest, and we both know that someone might try to snatch him. Kakashi grimaced at the idea, all of his pleasant demeanor gone. I don't think that anybody is insane enough, but our world is full of wannabe idiots that would love to hurt us. And if the word lets out that we have a half-blood Uzumaki that can use their Kongo Fusa, he will make it into bingo books of every worthwhile village, the Hokage said and wanted to spat onto the ground. A potential to tame any bijou is too great to ignore, and that's just scratching the surface of what he can do with them. Can we keep it off the official documents? Kakashi asked, and the Hokage narrowed his eyes. The more surprises he has, the less likely he is to be targeted soon. Perhaps even induction into ANBU would be advisable after the exams to protect his identity from our enemies. He won't be inducted into ANBU, the Hokage hissed, and Kakashi jumped away at the tone of the voice. Not now and not soon. Kakashi, I don't want another Itachi, and he needs to mature before I am even willing to consider him as a candidate. However, I won't make you report his Kekkai Genkai. Until after the exams it stays off the paperwork. Thank you, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said with a slight tilt of his head. I will instruct him to keep the knowledge a secret and to share it only with his teammates. I think that after our mission to Nami they can be trusted to keep their mouths shut about things. Do you think he will keep his mouth shut? Hokage asked, indicating the sleeping form of the resident troublemaker. I don't recall him being a subtle one. Until I started to train him. No, now the revelations of whom his ancestors are woke him up, Kakashi said, and I smiled. Besides, much of his behavior was an act. Was it? Considering his upbringing and the reaction of the village, Kakashi said, and the Hokage winced at this. He really didn't need to be reminded about his own failures in keeping the village in check. He was the Hokage, damn it. Yes, much of it was to get the attention and get noticed. However, since I focused only on him in the training and actually has the acceptance, and no mutters of the demon behind his back, he matured. That is quite fortunate, the Hokage said and allowed himself a smile. It would have been a shame if the only son of Minato was a fool and not a shinobi he ought to be. He is an Uzumaki through and through. Stubborn, energetic, brash, but with the intelligence to temper it, Kakashi said and paused, looking for words. He is still loud, but knows when to temper his more foolish urges and ideas. Good, the Chunin exam will be a bloody affair. Far bloodier than even yours was during the war. And you want them to take part in the war games, Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked, swallowing visibly. They might not survive the exam, especially if you say it will be worse than mine. We don't have a choice, Kakashi, the Hokage said and looked at the ANBU. Guard the door and make sure nobody overhears us. The two masked shinobi nodded and slipped out of the room. We have villages plot against us and we invited everybody to send as many teams as they can. IWA and Kumo too? Shikaka thinks that having their genin here will cool those hotter heads in Suna, the Hokage said and paused for a second. He is right on the account of it being a deterrent. Yujito Ni and Kurosuchi are the names you should recognize. Kakashi paused for a second, but then nodded. They have genin teams? The Hokage grimly smiled and looked at the sleeping form of Naruto. He will need to go against their students in the second stage. You better make them ready as either of the two will go easy on him. And I fear that Ni might know whom he is, making it even worse for him. Or better, Kumo is the only place that respects them, Kakashi said and looked at the Hokage. I will prepare him and if the time is sufficient, I will teach him how to deal with the more famous Kekkai Genkai. I hope that you won't fail me, Kakashi, the Hokage said and left the room. The news were better than he hoped for and it seemed that it prevented some of the problems he expected in the near future. An unstable and unpredictable jinchuriki was the biggest issue any village could have. One that was rash and prone to rushing into action without much thinking wasn't much better. On the other hand, one that was a trained shinobi that had some modicum of calm and intelligence was an extremely powerful asset that could stop an entire offensive with their sheer presence. Or make an impenetrable defense line collapse and shatter in a matter of minutes. It also meant that for once Konoha had a chance for hopefully a peaceful and calm decade without any wars close to its borders. That Nami mess, one caused by Kakashi and his team, was a good thing as now Konoha and Hai no Kuni could tap into the wealth of that island and more importantly have de facto control over it. But on the other hand, Kiri, that was recovering from the civil war with Yagura finally killed, and Kumo always wanting more influence, weren't happy that this piece of land was snatched right from before their noses. While none of the major villages wanted to be the one to start another round of wars, and Hiruzen was more than aware that the lengthy period of calm was a strange thing, not a norm as the shinobi villages weren't at each other's throats for over 20 years. An extremely weird thing considering that in past 40 years there were 3 major wars and another one should have erupted few years ago. Yet it didn't, and he wanted to extend this period for as long as possible. Konoha wasn't ready for another war, and while the shinobi forces were slowly recovering from the Kyuubi incident, the economical base was still shaky and the Uchiha clan was gone. When during previous wars it was them that took upon themselves the brunt of fighting and commanding, now there were none that could do it, and it would be decades before any significant number would be able to take to the field. We need a decade or two of peace, Hiruzen muttered as he left the hospital and looked at the sky. Can we have that, or will we have a war when we least expect it? He shook his head and made his way to the office. Taking the time to exchange few words with the villagers he passed and be a kind grandfather to the children of the village. Children that were the future, and the responsibility of the village. Without them the future and the survival weren't a certain thing and the village would be doomed. Perhaps he needed to send out trackers and ANBU into the world to find the remnants of the Uzumaki, and those few families of the Senju, and the Uchiha that never made it to the village with Hashirama and Madara. From what he knew, a fair share was still wandering the world, still having the famous mastery of jutsu, and in case of the Uchiha, their dojutsu. Is it worth risking the ANBU for the chance of finding a couple of families? He asked the portraits of the former Kage. And then he knew the answer. They were the part of the clans that founded the village, and thus were worth any effort taken to find them and bring back to the village. However, first the ANBU was needed for all of the operations done by Ibiki that made all of the foreign ambassadors in Konoha protest in the strongest of words about recent levels of surveillance and mistrust. You didn't need to spy so openly, Hiruzen said and snorted as he reached for the first of many reports piled on his desks that were also deemed important enough to be brought to his attention. Anko dodged Sakura's punch and moved out of the way of the another before stopping the third one. The girl was getting better and started to be more of a kunoichi that she was of a fangirl and a bookworm. Not that the last one was a bad thing to be in their field. It was beneficial, but only if balanced by something more than the sheer knowledge and intelligence. Anko laughed as she enjoyed herself and sparred with Sakura. It was slow and sloppy by her normal standards, but compared to what the girl showed before it was a noticeable progress. You are better, Anko said as they moved away from each other. Not that in ideal circumstances you will need taijutsu for more than save your ass from troubles. What do you mean, Anko-sensei? Sakura asked with a frown. Isn't it one of the 3 basic ninja arts? Yes, it is, Anko said and hopped onto a tree stump behind her. But for a great many of ninja it is the least useful one. No matter what you do, your skills aren't for the front line and taking on taijutsu monsters like Guy or ninjutsu specialists like Kakashi. Yours are to support them and keep enemy of their backs. Throw genjutsu, poison, catch enemy in traps and provide cover or heal. That's what you are possibly better at. So why do you still push me so hard? Because of the Chunin exams, Anko said and paused for a few seconds, considering her words. I cannot really predict against whom you will need to fight, and many of them might force you to engage in taijutsu duel. One that you need to know how to win, fast and dirty and efficiently. The longer the duel, the more energy you waste and the higher the chance of a lucky hit. And a higher chance that I lose, Sakura added, making Anko nod. The girl then grimaced in disgust looking at her sensei. But fighting dirty and using every known weakness against the enemy isn't very fair. And the shinobi world is one where nobility and chivalry can get you killed, Anko said bluntly. We deal with the biggest scum out there and aren't much better. Just much deadlier and more skilled due to the training we have. Slitting throats, bribing, torture, interrogation, kidnapping, that's all we do and much more. Then Anko smiled friendly and looked at Sakura. Fighting dirty and hitting pressure points or known weaknesses is the least scary part of what we do and one that won't leave you with any traumas and nightmares. Seeing Sakura waver, Anko jumped down and started another bout of taijutsu spar, forcing the girl to focus on defending herself from the strikes aimed at all of the vulnerable points Anko could easily reach. Normally she was against using it when battling friends, but it was a good lesson and a very pointed one, too, and an excellent motivation to train harder and get better. Sasuke blocked the strike that would have snapped his neck otherwise and leaped away from the follow-up. Tossing a handful of shuriken at Yamato to give himself room to breath and a break in fighting, he looked at the older jonin and smiled. Finally he felt like he was being taught something useful and that the jonin teaching him new stuff. You are better, Yamato said with a small smile as he swatted aside the shuriken. And can think more strategically. Sasuke allowed himself a smile and hurled himself at Yamato. Their swords crashed against each other and Sasuke tried to force Yamato to move backwards. The jonin conceded some space and then Sasuke was forced to leap backwards, to avoid a strike at his groin. That's low, he muttered looking at Yamato. Be happy that I let you dodge, Yamato said and Sasuke tensed. Kakashi would show you no mercy if he was serious. Even if it is brutal, it is efficient, and you know that most of the world won't give you a chance to dodge. Sasuke nodded and wiped sweat of his face. His breathing was getting ragged and no amount of training and determination could keep it even when faced with Yamato. The jonin had an aura of lethality and danger around himself, one that scared Sasuke. No, it wasn't that he was scared, more of an awareness that a single mistake could end with his death. That will be enough for now, Sasuke, Yamato said and beckoned for Sasuke to follow him. What do you know about Will of Fire? It is a philosophy of the Senju clan. Nothing more? Yamato asked and frowned. I didn't attend much academy, but I thought they taught you more. Sasuke closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to think. It is also a philosophy of the village, and each Hokage needs to embody it. And every shinobi should strive to do the same, Yamato said and looked at Sasuke. You sure you don't remember anything about it? Sasuke shook his head in denial. It is a philosophy that makes us focus so much on teamwork and cooperation. We focus so much on those exercises that you think that are stupid, like building teamwork or cohesion, because that's the way the village was founded and then grew. Yamato paused and considered his words. Because of the talents I possess, I studied the teachings of the Shodame-sama, and one of the more interesting things that you probably should know is that he and Madara were the best friends. Sasuke jerked and looked at Yamato. What? Yamato chuckled at this, unsettling the Uchiha even more. Yes, he said and smiled. Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara were friends. I thought that you were taught this at the academy or in your clan. No, I was not. Well, today is the time for a lesson then, Yamato said with a smile. They managed to stop the bloodshed between their clans and settle down in one place. Konoha was the village they founded and protected. The teamwork we all so love is from the teachings of Hashirama and his clan. Many villages don't send more than a single jonin on a mission. We always send a squad of at least 2 and in many cases 3 or 4. The genin teams that survive aren't separated, are they? Sasuke asked as they stopped in front of the memorial stone. If the teamwork and cohesion is good and there are no requests from them or one joins the ANBU, then no, they stay that way for as long as feasible, Yamato said and looked at the stone. Kakashi's team was an example of that. Until the death of his 2 teammates, they mostly worked together. Even if 2 were genins and he was a jonin. What did happen to them? Them? Yamato asked with an arched eyebrow. Kakashi-sensei's team. Well, the sensei of it, Namake's Minato, died on the night when Kyuubi broke free, Yamato said. Sealing it in a newborn babe, his own son. Kakashi served in ANBU for a long time. And the 2 other are Noera-rin, a kunoichi that was turned into a jinchuriki by Kiri with a faulty seal, so that the sanbai would break free inside of Konoha. Kakashi killed her to prevent that, and as for the last one, Uchiha Obito, the Sharingan Kakashi has. Where do you think it comes? From some random Uchiha he saved? No, Yamato said and shook his head slowly. During the Third War, their team was carrying out a mission and they were ambushed by IWA forces. They pushed away Obito's body. Half of it was crushed by a rock. He was dying and he demanded that Rin transplanted his Sharingan into Kakashi's empty eye socket. Sasuke mulled over those words. Now it made more sense. Much more sense, and the scar under Kakashi's eye explained itself. However, he paused and then his eyes widened as he realized something else. Kyuubi was sealed in a newborn babe, he said quietly, and Yamato nodded. A babe that was a child of the Hokage. Yamato once again nodded. You also said that Naruto is something more than he seems to be. That is all true, Yamato said and placed his hand on Sasuke's shoulder. And your line of thinking is correct. However, I advise you not to mention it aloud. For the same reason why he doesn't have the name of his father. Because of the spies and assassins? Among many other things, Yamato said and looked at the onyx black surface of the stone. Murdering Kages or their direct descendants is usually frowned upon, but Namake's name is so hated in IWA that even the Tsuchikage doesn't have the power to force all of his underlings to listen to him, and don't order assassins to bring them the head of the spawn of Minato. And there is scum that doesn't care about the politics between the major villages and will do everything to send us to war with someone, just out of spite. What about his mother? Sasuke asked and paused, seeing Yamato smile. Think, you are a bright boy, Yamato said and pointedly looked at the stone. He was given her name because while feared, her clan is officially extinct and the few survivors are far and wide. I won't give you a name because again, I don't want to point people in his direction and there are more reasons than that. He frowned and Sasuke shot a worried look at his sensei. Find in the archives the list of the killed in the Kyuubi attack, Yamato finally said. She won't be on the main list, but close enough that the rest is simple. Isn't that a document I don't have access to? Sasuke asked. Last time I checked it was for Chunin and higher. You are a ninja, how you get there is not my problem. You wanted data that I cannot openly share. Find how to enter the archives and get the document. Yamato looked at Sasuke with a malign look to his eyes. I heard that now ANBU are placed around the archives to scare off potential thieves. Jiraiya slipped out of Kusa and let out a sigh of relief. The atmosphere in the village was tense, and it was clear as a day that nobody wanted his presence inside. Even if the leadership was as kind and as polite as it ought to be to a student of the Sandaime Hokage and a sage, there were no real feelings in their behavior. Just gestures, empty and hollow. Hoping to soothe his suspicions and keep his attention elsewhere. They're plotting against us, Jiraiya muttered and smiled as he remembered the letter from the sensei with the update about the Chunin exam. Need to tell Ibiki to make sure they cannot say no to the invitation and that they send as many teams as possible. He could feel the gazes of the village ANBU on his back and lingering any longer was ill-advised. He could take on probably the whole forces of Kusa if he went sage, but any combat would be bad and would shove Kusa deeper into the arms of whoever that was behind all of the plots aimed at Konoha. The question is, what would be so enticing they wouldn't be able to say no? Jiraiya frowned as he started to make his way towards the biggest town of this country. The chance to learn what was going on was much higher, and the red light district was a priceless source of information. Their shinobi are fairly skilled and without bending the rules can advance far. He scratched his chin and glanced backwards. The ANBU weren't paying any more attention to him, which was good. Or at least the more visible ones weren't, the rest he couldn't tell where they were. But should be far enough that he should have a fair warning before they appeared. They need to be bought so that they can be controlled in what they do. Jiraiya mused and ignored the jonin that passed him by. Sensei should be able to come up with something, and there is always Shikaku, and sending a couple of ANBU squads to scare them is not a bad option. They're rattled as is by my presence. ANB will make them even afraid of doing anything. Or make them so determined they will do it no matter the costs. Naruto opened the door to his flat, and his hand went to his kunai holster when he noticed someone in his flat. It's just me, Naruto-kun, the Hokage said and stepped into Naruto's view. I know that Kakashi talked with you about your clan. Naruto stiffened and looked at the Hokage suspiciously. He was one of few people that really cared about him. But at the same time, Kakashi told Naruto not to mention the topic of his clan and family. You don't need to hide that you know about the clan when talking with me, the Hokage said as he sat down in one of the old and worn-out armchairs in Naruto's apartments, a cup of tea in his hands. I know about this and Kakashi needed my permission to tell me. Yes, Gigi, Naruto said as he moved to the second armchair and looked at the Hokage. I'm curious, why did you keep this knowledge hidden from me? I had my reasons, the Hokage said and sighed. Trying to protect you and wanting to bury my guilt. Killing family of a Kage, former or current, can be a cause of war, and many wanted to drag us into a war. You thinking name Uzumaki is some random name kept most eyes off you. At this Hokage smiled and pulled the hat off his head before placing it on the table. He smiled then at something he could only think of and looked at Naruto. Did you ever wonder why the vests Chunin and Jonin wear and much of the standard attire of our forces has the same swirl as your clan? No, Naruto said and shook his head. I assumed it was just a decorative element. And the academy once again didn't teach you what you should have known, the Hokage said, and then the gaze of his eyes focused on Naruto's. Or you skipped the classes when they explained that. Naruto averted his eyes and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I skipped some history classes, he said, making the Hokage sigh in a manner that didn't suggest good things for Naruto. The swirl is a sign of your family, the Hokage said, and Naruto nodded. The swirl on the uniforms of our forces is a sign of the bond we shared and the many marriages between the Senju and Uzumaki clans. Your mother was one of the last Uzumaki that arrived here before the refugees after the fall of Uzushio. The island is still standing, but since the end of the last war we didn't send there anybody. Could I go there? Naruto asked. I would like to see the home of my ancestors. The Hokage was silent for several long moments, but then he slowly nodded. Yes, I think it could be arranged at the end of your training with Kakashi, he said and allowed a faint smile. It would be also educational for your teammates, to see the place where so much of the history happened. Thank you, Gigi, the Hokage laughed, and pulled out a thick sealing scroll from his robes. Open this scroll, Naruto-kun. Naruto took the scroll from the Hokage, slapped it down onto the floor and opened. Inside, on the paper there were over a dozen of storage seals, each of them of an intricate design, done by someone who mastered the art of sealing or was at least proficient in what they were doing. The scroll itself is an artifact from Uzushio, the Hokage said, and Naruto's eyes flickered with warm flames. It was done by your relative, Uzumaki Mido, wife of the Shodame Hokage, and since then kept its content inside. You can unseal the content from the first 3 seals. Naruto nodded and applied his chakra to the seals, making clouds appear as their content popped into view. Several heavy wooden chests stood in the middle of the room, each of them emblazoned with the sigil of the clan they belonged to. That sigil was the spiral of Naruto's clan, and as he placed his hand on it, locks in the first chest clicked and disengaged. All of this is for you, Naruto-kun, the Hokage said with a smile. There are weapons, clothes and books you might find interesting and useful. Thank you, Gigi, Naruto exclaimed as tears of joy ran down his cheeks. Sakura frowned as she followed Anko to Konoha Hospital. She couldn't understand what her scary sensei could be looking for inside of that building, and at her questions Anko only smiled, not bothering to answer them. They entered it, and Sakura's frown deepened as her sensei seemed to ignore most of the doctors and nurses. I can't take you to my true home, Anko said with a sigh. You don't have a high enough clearance to know that it exists. So we need to use the labs at the hospital. Labs? Yes, the snake summoner said impatiently. While Tsunade-sama developed new ways to heal our injured shinobi, she often needed to develop antidotes to various poisons used by other villages. My sensei, Orochimaru, her teammate, developed new toxins and poisons, often using the samples of the poisons she needed to counter. Wasn't he banished for something, Orochimaru? Anko asked as she showed her ID card to an ANBU standing in front of steel doors. Yes, he was. But it was not for doing that. What's the reason for his banishment? You might learn if I decide that you deserve to know it. Sakura nodded and watched the ANBU open the door before letting them through it. Inside it was all stainless steel, and a strong stench of chemicals assaulted Sakura's nose. It looks more clean than I expected, she said, looking around and seeing nobody outside of them. We do most of the work elsewhere, Anko said. You just don't have a clearance to know about it. So we will use this place for now. She allowed herself an impish smile that sent shivers down Sakura's spine. How good is your biology and chemistry knowledge? I had top marks from my academy tests, Anko-sensei. Anko hummed quietly as she rummaged through the cupboards. It should suffice you for now, she said, and then pulled out several thick and by the looks of them old books. Read them and be done by the end of the next week. Human Anatomy and Physiology, Poisonous Plants of Hai no Kuni, Venomous Animals of Kaze no Kuni, and Notes on the More Common Poisons. Now, however, let's see how much you know about poisons from the academy. What do you mean, Anko-sensei? Sakura asked as she saw Anko pull out several glass vials with things inside of them. Those 10 contain poisons or venens you should be able to recognize after the academy, Anko said as she brought them to one of the tables. Assuming you have some kind of a brain that works and basic knowledge, how many teams do you think we will have, Shikaku? The Hokage asked as he looked at the Jonin commander. Kiri wants an alliance, the scarred Nara said. We suggested in the last message to the new Mizukage that we expect from each of the major villages 20 teams, so I think that they will send at least 30. They are licking their wounds and need to show to nobles that they still matter. And they have a new Kage too, the Hokage mused. One that wants to make an even stronger statement that they're strong. I think that she should be invited for the finals and that we rig the bracket a bit in their favor. I would add perhaps 20% of missions that come to us from Nami. They are fairly straightforward, but have high fees and what they need is reputation and money. I would suggest that when negotiating with her in person, Hiruzen said and let out a weary sigh. The world is at each other's throats, and they will think that it is a lie. Now, if I were to offer it to her when she is in Konoha, she should believe it. He looked at the map of the world and then looked at Suna. Did Kazekage respond to our messages? He did, Shikaka said and winced. He is displeased, but he will send 40 teams. 40 teams? Hiruzen frowned. Suna was always short on manpower. I had the same thought, Hokage-sama, Shikaka said and then added more grimly. Until I had a chance to talk with Inoichi. Our interrogations brought first fruits. It seems that Suna is plotting with someone against us, and want to slip as many agents into the exam as they can. The ANBU will need to be dispatched to take care of them. We did something similar before the Third War. ANBU teams were inserted into the exams to eliminate several participants and protect Kushina, which can weaken the defenses of the village, Shikaka pointed out. A trade-off. But I doubt that one would attack during the second stage. Too many foreign ninja in the way. I would attack during the second when we can't check everybody. Shikaka nodded. Kumo and IWA seem normal. 20 teams from each and they're sending Kuratsuchi and Yujitoni, which suggests they might want to negotiate. Granddaughter of the Tsuchikage and niece of the Reikage and Jinchuriki of Nibi means something. Or Anoki is playing another game of his, Hiruzen said and sighed. He is older than I am and played the game for longer than I can remember. That too is an option, Shikaka agreed. But I don't think he is the one that also plots with Kusa and Suna. Kusa and Aim and even Taki are sending 15 teams each and seem keen on driving home the point that they hate us. That's a lot of teams, the Hokage said and grimaced. The exam will be a huge one. 110 from other major villages and 45 more from the 3 minor ones, Shikaka said and then checked one scroll. And 3 from Otogekure. Did Jiraiya confirm it was the lair of Orochimaru? He didn't, but all the evidence suggested is it, Shikaka said and allowed himself a far more predatory smile than normally. The patrols report an increase in traffic from our village and to Otogekure. Is he that sloppy? I expected more of him. The Hokage winced. Or did he fall that low? I think that he wants to be seen. And dangle it in front of our eyes. I dispatched additional ANBU platoons to scout, and they should be back in a couple of days. So a total of 155 teams, the Hokage said. How many of ours would you suggest sending into the exam? Around 70, some of which would be undercover ANBU. More and people will ask questions. Less and the questions also will be asked. Sasuke kneeled at the edge of the roof on the other side of the street from the archives building and watched. The lowering sun that cast less and less light onto the world and the growing shadows worked in his favor. But then, the guards that were hidden somewhere were of the kind that wouldn't reveal itself so easily. And he stood no chance against them in combat, nor killing them was an option. They were fellow Konoha shinobi and killing comrades was the worst thing a Konoha ninja could do. Ever. His black eyes flickered to the red and black of the Sharingan, and the silhouettes of the ANBU became visible. 1, he murmured, his eyes focused on the closest ANBU. 2. His eyes flickered to the next one. 3. The final one that was in the middle. No, Sasuke whispered. Standard team is 4. 3 and the leader. Where is he? His eyes widened as he realized that the final one was either inside a fairly easy to overcome problem, or was standing on some vantage point, and waiting for the potential thief to deal with the ANBU on the building. Both were standard protection of the target tactics taught at the academy, and it was hard to say which one was more likely. Where are you? Sasuke asked nobody in particular, as he scanned the roofs of the nearby buildings and waiting for the darkness to settle. He reached to the pouch on his belt, and checked the content. Shuriken, check. Smoke bombs, check. Explosive tags, check. Ninja wire, check. He is good, Yugao murmured as she watched Sasuke from a vantage point he so far missed. How is it that he is a genin? Social skills or rather lack of them, Tenzo murmured from his spot next to her. And psych evaluation. Ninjutsu and taijutsu are excellent, and some chunin would struggle against him. But the rest is bad. Do you think he will assume I'm inside? I think he will do it, Tenzo said and indicated the 3 ANBU on the roof. The fact that he took enough time to notice them is rare for him. He can be a bit hasty at times. Uzumaki brat for all his irritating habits was a good challenge, Yugao said, and Tenzo could detect a smile under her mask. This one looks like less of a challenge to stop. Tenzo nodded and looked at the sky. I think he will move soon. Did you tell your team to not kill him? They will let him grab the scroll and then pounce onto him. And bruise quite a bit in the process. Good. Let him put up a good fight. He needs a different opponent than what he usually has, and he needs that information. Yamato tensed when he noticed that Sasuke started to move. That's what you learned, Sasuke. Sasuke dropped onto the ground and raced across the street. He noticed the movement of the ANBU and immediately ducked. He hurled a smoke bomb in their direction and smashed his body against the wall of the building. He paused to catch his breath and calm himself before opening the door and slipping inside. From what he knew, the building was empty at this time of the day, yet he was proven wrong when he almost smashed into a fellow genin. Not giving him any chance, Sasuke kicked him in the groin, and the second the boy gasped in pain and almost bent in half. The blunt end of Sasuke's kunai smashed into the boy's head, knocking him out. Outside of the bruised pride and pain, he should be fine. Sasuke considered his options for a second, but then he shrugged and moved deeper. He had an idea where his goal was, but he also was more than aware that the ANB wouldn't be fooled by his cheap trick with the smoke bomb. He raced down the short corridor ahead of him, and kicked open the door at the end before stopping for a second to find the direction. He smiled when he noticed the shelf that should have the scroll he was after. He approached it, and seeing no traps he reached for the scrolls. He didn't have time to look through them, and he could already hear the ANBU moving towards him. He slipped them into one of his holsters and raced out of the room, his eyes widening as the motion of everything became slower thanks to his Sharingan, and it saved him from getting beheaded by an ANBU coming towards him. He ducked under the swing of the ninjato and raced past the ANBU, only to find 2 more waiting for him and looking as if they were ready to murder him. Surrender, Uchiha-san, one of them said. You stand no chance against us, Sasuke said, and reaching into his pouch for a smoke bomb. He dropped it, and the moment the corridor was filled with thick smoke he moved. His Sharingan allowed him to see through it, and he barely passed the 2 ANBU. Only for the last one to drop onto him. Its bulk smashed onto his back and forced Sasuke to the ground. Surrender, a feminine voice spoke from behind him. Second later he heard something click, and then he felt a razor-sharp blade touch his throat. You are the last of your clan, but Konoha has no need for traitors and scum that tries to steal things from it. He swallowed and wanted to throw the ANBU of his back, but then the blade was pressed more forcefully against his throat, and he felt his blood run. He swallowed and then relented, ceasing his attempts to struggle against the ANBU. Much better, the ANBU said as she cuffed him. She then hauled him up. Walk slowly, she said as she kept her hand on his shoulder. You do something unexpected, I will kill you. Sasuke swallowed as he could feel the cool of a steel blade pressed against his back. The tip pressed just enough to remind him that it was there, yet not causing any wounds. Yet. He moved slowly, his moves even sluggish, just so that the scary ANB wouldn't have a reason to kill or at the very least maim him. They walked out of the building, and once outside of it Sasuke noticed Yamato waiting for him. I wondered how long would it take the ANBU to catch you, Yamato said, and then looked at the ANBU behind Sasuke. Nico, release him. You need to admit he was good. He was, the ANBU behind said, and Sasuke glanced at her. Not as good as the Uzumaki brat. He could at least keep several squads running for days. That phrase made Sasuke's ego hurt, maybe even more than the fact that he got caught by the ANBU. Well, caught and first beaten by that surprise attack. This one time nobody will know about the fact that you sneaked into the archives, Yamato said sternly, and Sasuke looked at him. Next time you do something foolish and dangerous, information about this incident will make its way to the ANBU, the rest you can guess. Sasuke swallowed, ignoring his pride, and slowly nodded in understanding. Good, tomorrow we won't train, so do the research on katan and other natures of chakra, and after that I might show you some jutsu that can be useful for you. Naruto's eyes widened as he looked at the content of the chest he got from Gigi. They were so full of various clothes, sets of armor, weapons and scrolls on what he assumed was his clan jutsu and history that he had issues believing it was all real. He pulled out a kunai from a holster on his leg and gently stabbed himself in the hand. Pain shot through his body as blood poured out of the wound, yet the things remained there. It was no illusion, even if a good part of his mind was yelling at him that it was one. He shoved that aside and rummaged through the content of the chests. All of the clothes felt smooth and much nicer than his usual orange and blue jumper, one he mostly wore to get the attention, and the scolding gaze of his sensei was getting through his love of it. Some of them looked extremely extravagant with loud and flashy colors that attracted attention, not to mention being done from so light of a cloth that they almost seeped through Naruto's fingers. He put them away and instead focused on the shirts, hoodies and pants made out of muted and subdued colors. They were all made out of a rougher and tougher fabric that was still nicer than his jumper, but he could tell that it was made for ninja and fighting. Not looking fancy. Much to his disappointment, all of them were in various shades of blues and blacks and grays, excluding a couple of hoodies that had several wide dark red stripes on the front. Kagebunshin, Naruto intoned, doing one of the most useful hand seals, and 3 clones popped into existence in the room. You know what to do, he said, and the clones nodded. One of them started to clean his flat, throwing out trash and organizing some of the mess he had inside, while the other 2 started to sort the content of the chest, as well as tried to put it in a more organized fashion. A task that proved far harder than it seemed to, and Naruto was only done with it as the moon was high in the sky and the night fell onto Konoha. Ibiki tossed the kunai and smiled when it landed where he wanted it to land. He ignored the quivering form of the prisoner he was interrogating and looked at the ANBU that interrupted him. What? Hokage-sama is here, the ANBU said. With Shikaku-sama. Ibiki arched an eyebrow at this, but then nodded. Have Inoichi take over his interrogation, he said, and walked out of the room. Once he is done with him, start to look through the files of those with access to the reports I highlighted. The ANBU nodded and disappeared, leaving Ibiki with his thoughts as he walked from the darker and officially not existing parts of the building. Most of the ninja population of Konoha was scared of him as it was. Letting out the horrors locked deep underground would make them wonder if he was insane. Besides, they didn't need to exactly know how some of the intelligence data was extracted, or how some spies were found. The only ones that really had an idea of its existence was the ANBU, most of the Jonin, and almost whole Yamanaka clan because of their clan jutsu being extensively utilized. Ibiki cleaned the blood of his face and stepped into his office, only to find the Nara Patriarch and the Hokage wait for him, with none of the usual ANBU around, which was a bit suspicious. But then, even village leaders had a safe amount of distrust towards their most elite assassins and enforcers. What do you want? Ibiki asked as he sat down behind his desk and looked at the transcripts from the most recent interrogations. Making those working for Danzo talk is a challenge, and I don't like disturbances. I'm the Hokage, Ibiki, the Hokage said, flexing his chakra and making Ibiki wonder if the aged Kage didn't start more serious training recently. You have the autonomy because it's bringing benefits. Ibiki bowed his head in apology, and wondered for a moment why Shikaku also was here. He knew that it was Shikaku now that ran the Chunin exams, but it was still strange to see the Hokage and his de facto second-in-command in one place. What can you tell us about those 3 genin? Shikaku said, throwing a scroll into the desk. Rumors reached us that they will compete in the Chunin exams. Sabaku no Gara, Sabaku no Kankuru, and Sabaku no Temari? Ibiki asked and sighed. Unstable jinchuriki of Ichibi and his siblings. Is Raza insane enough to actually send us an unstable son of his that can be a threat to the whole village? The looks exchanged by the Hokage and Shikaku made Ibiki frown. He didn't mention that his son makes Sasuke look like the most well-behaved kid, did he? He didn't, the Hokage said and frowned. Usually we don't announce to each other whom we're sending so soon. Usually it is a week or 2 before, not 5 months in advance. He might be playing some kind of a game and hopes to make us freak out over the Ichibi, Shikaku said, and Ibiki could tell that the Nara was onto something. It is all too convenient. Spies that were in our village are eliminated one by one, and suddenly we get news about 3 dangerous beings that will take part in the exams. Or he wants to scare us, Ibiki said, and then paused for a second. They are also his children. That's smelling to me like he is up to something. He wouldn't have sent such a notice, so much in advance, unless he wanted to impress us and someone else with his actions. That aside, you are the proctor of the first stage, the Hokage said, and the smile on the face of Shikaku made Ibiki wonder what the Jonin commander was up to. However, it is Shikaku who will prepare the test for the genin. I guess it will be the stage where I will need to eliminate all of the more obvious agents placed in the crowd. Actually, you will let them slip, Shikaku said, and Ibiki was about to get up when shadows leaped from the Nara and trapped him. We have too many villages that don't know their agendas. We will let them advance to the second stage, and then they will get removed, permanently. Do you suggest the thing I have in mind? Ibiki asked, and Shikaku looked at him. Have the NBU in the exam, and when the time is right knock them out, and take for some quality time with me and Inoichi? That is one of scenarios. We know that some will be after Byakugan and Sharingan and Kongo Fusa. Ibiki's eyes widened at the last one. Yes, Naruto has it, and it's supposed to stay as a secret, but you know spies and secrets. It is a matter of time before they get their hands on the secret, Ibiki muttered darkly. Not that now there are many spies left. Well, outside of those working for IWA, Kumo and Kiri. I didn't touch those yet. And you won't touch them, the Hokage said, making Ibiki focus on the aged leader. We don't want Sachikage and Reikage more suspicious than need be, and as for Mizukage, she wants an alliance. You will remove the leaks that give data to them, but won't touch any of their main agents. It might make Kumo and IWA wonder what we're up to. We don't think so, Shikaku said. Attention of the Sachikage is focused on our ally, and his attempts to look more powerful, while the Reikage is concerned by the growing threat of Kiri and the new village, Otogekure. The village many of the agents work for, I don't think it is that new. It might look new, but the network backing it up is old. Really old. The Hokage and Shikaku exchanged looks, and Ibiki continued. If I didn't know better, I would say that it was founded by Danzo, but the Warhawk cares too much about Konoha to do something like it. But his mode of operation, network organization, everything, they have it. That is a very interesting development, Shikaku said, and Ibiki arched an eyebrow. Everything else points at our dear friend, Orochimaru, but I didn't expect him to use the knowledge of the root. The snake Sannin, Ibiki frowned as he tried to remember the content of his stash of blackmail material, one he gathered just in case he needed to make a hasty retreat from the village. He was a loyal shinobi, but often Ti was affected by the politics, and when everybody knew he had dirt on the key players, he could do his job undisturbed. After all, nobody needed to know that Hyuga Hayashi had a lover or that he ran some shady things. I would need to check what my predecessor had on him, but there could have been ties between him and Danzo. Do it, the Hokage said, and then glanced at Shikaku. Make sure that someone is watching all of the paths used by the route. And make sure that whoever they catch is brought to me in one piece and alive, Ibiki said and paused. Actually, scratch that bit about alive. With route it doesn't make much of a difference, their seals make getting data out of them a nightmare. Hokage-sama, is there a chance that Jiraiya-sama comes home soon? Not sooner than in 2 or 3 months. His talents are more useful elsewhere. Ibiki nodded and got up from his desk. If that's the case, Hokage-sama, Shikaku, pardon me, but I have a prisoner I need to make talk and he might actually have some useful information concerning our friends. Sakura squinted her eyes as she looked at the description of the symptoms caused by the poison and tried to associate it with one of the dozen or 2 poisons she learned about. Most of them was a pale imitation of the most potent and dangerous poisons used in combat by the Ambiyu or medics, but they were a dangerous thing nonetheless. While against some ninja it wouldn't work at all and most could make an antidote, civilians were less aware of them and thus were the main choice of the poisons when eliminating annoying lords. Which made recognizing them even more important. It's based on the heavy metals, Sakura finally said and bit her lip. It reminds me of the poison used by Akasuna no Sasori. Very good, Anko said with a smile. It is a poison that gave us a lot of headaches when we last clashed with Suna. It's one used by almost all of the puppet masters from the village. Sasori improved upon it and made it even more potent. Now, what are the disadvantages of it? Can't be used for the poisonous mist, Sakura said and frowned. It is as much of a danger to the user as it is to the victim. While poisonous mist is usually made with a toxic the user is immune to, either naturally as in case of some clans and in the rest acquired the immunity. That is a very good answer, Anko said and tossed at Sakura a vial. What is inside? Sakura took the vial and rolled it between her fingers, trying to see the color of its content. Colorless, she mused, which makes it hard to detect and can be slipped into almost anything, and is odorless too. It is one of the favorites of our ENBU. Especially for the missions when we can't have any weapons available to us. Anko took the vial from Sakura and allowed herself a predatory smile. How to explain it? All of the ANBU go through treatment that makes them mostly immune to the poison, and one of the favorite ways of getting it to the target is skin contact. You rub it onto your skin, lips and several other places, Anko said, making Sakura wince and back away. Yes, it sounds disgusting and can be, but it is better than praying to the gods that nobody finds your weapons. You would be surprised how sloppy certain people can be when given a desirable man or a woman. They're dumb and touching them and letting poison work is much less troublesome than slipping a kunai under their rib. So, how can I protect from such poisons? Mostly watch out who touches you, Anko said and grinned at Sakura. Luckily for you, I am one of the most infamous poison users of Konoha, so I will teach you a thing or two. Now, since we are done with the more boring theory and you seem competent enough for now. Want to try to make some of the simpler poisons? Sakura blinked at this and looked at Anko as if she grew a second head. Making poisons is in my opinion more important than studying them, Anko said quietly as she looked around the lab. If you know how to make them, your teammates suddenly appreciate your presence more and making antidotes can be easier. And thirdly, you get to see what works and what doesn't, how to mix the ingredients, or what elements are good and which aren't. A thing that a medic also needs. Tsunade-sama is the greatest medic out there, but she knows so much about poisons that she can kill you as easily as she heals you. Sakura nodded and steeled herself, aware of how unpleasant the next few hours could prove to be. She heard some things about how poisons were tested and she didn't fancy an idea of doing it on her own. You won't get to taste the poisons on anything yet, Anko said and patted Sakura on the shoulder. You do good, and we might move on to something more pleasant for you. In fact, we will, as there are things that all kunoichi need to know, and considering composition of your team, you need it even more. But that will be later. First physical fitness and more taijutsu. Kakashi was confused when he saw Naruto in his new clothes. He looked more like a ninja and screamed less kill me, even if the spiral on the back of his hoodie was a huge attention magnet for most villages wanting new bloodlines. However, in the dark blue, almost black pants, shirt and a hoodie with several wide stripes of red he could pass for a ninja. A wardrobe change? Kakashi inquired curiously. As much as I like orange, it isn't the best color for hiding, Naruto said, and Kakashi I smiled at this. And Gigi brought me that storage scroll, so I decided to make use of its content. Kakashi made a note to ask what scroll his student was talking about. The Hokage could be infuriating at times, and that didn't improve Kakashi's mood much. However, it also seemed that whatever was in the scroll was from Uzushio and from wherever else the Hokage thought it was needed. That's good, Kakashi said and looked at his student. Make 3 clones, have them practice for Rasengan, and you will work on something else. What? Elemental jutsu. Naruto's eyes widened at this. Not many genin were taught those jutsu, in many cases because there was no need, but in many more because they didn't possess the necessary chakra reserves or control. You have stupid amounts of chakra, more than most kages and kyubi. That sealed inside of you is even more chakra, which gives you an advantage over most ninja you can face in the near future. Naruto frowned at this, his mind working as he tried to guess what Kakashi meant. I can toss jutsu for however long I want, while they need to conserve it? That is one thing. Second is that the affinity, each ninja has an affinity for one or more elements, matters less. Yes, you trying to use katan jutsu, which is most likely a total anathema to your affinity, would be an extremely ineffective idea, but one that would work. So, where do we start? This, Kakashi said as he pulled out a piece of brown paper. Brown because of the sheer amount of chakra it is infused with. The trees from which it is made are fed chakra since they are a sapling, and anything that's made from them reacts to chakra. In case of this mixed natures, one has manifest themselves. There are 5 natures, and outside of rare cases, namely Kekii Genkai and 1 Kekii Toda, you have a single affinity, Kakashi said and channeled his chakra into the paper, making it wrinkle the second the chakra passed through it. What I have is Raiton, extremely offensive element that has a number of different uses. If it wrinkles for Raiton, Naruto said, and Kakashi looked at him. How does it behave if I have say Katan chakra? Amuse me and tell me how, Kakashi said and paused. You should be able to guess it. Think of how each of the elements would behave. Water soaks everything it touches, that's kinda obvious, Naruto said and Kakashi nodded. Fire burns down things, wind shreds them, and earth is just there? Doton chakra makes the paper crumble, Kakashi said and reached to ruffle Naruto's hair. Let's see, what chakra do you have? Naruto took a paper offered to him by Kakashi and channeled chakra through it. For a moment nothing happened, then it was sliced down the middle, the line perfectly straight, and the edges sharp. Futon, just like your father, Kakashi said with a frown. I was expecting you to inherit the Uzumaki affinity for Suiton. Futon is the only element I don't know much, partially because of how troublesome it is to use when your affinity is Raiton. I can teach you how to master it, but for anything more you'll need help of Asuma. Before you ask, yes, the names of the countries indicate what is the main nature in them. It usually means that majority of ninja hailing from one is proficient in it, but at times second affinity is also strong. For us it is Katan and Doton, for Kuri Suiton and Futon. The rest I'll leave you to find out on your own. So Asuma-sensei is the one I should ask for help? Naruto asked. For help with jutsu, yes, for mastering the element itself. I can teach you just fine, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Make 3 clones. Naruto nodded and 3 copies of the blonde popped into existence, making Kakashi wonder how much chakra his student had and how easily could he use it. But then he shrugged and made a clone of himself, giving it barely any chakra. Send them with my clone, he will show you how to start the training. So, sensei, what do you plan to do? Work on your taijutsu and usage of weapons, Kakashi said with an unnervingly cheerful eye smile. One that made shivers pass down the Naruto's spine. They're sloppy and need to be improved, now. Sasuke sat on his bed and frowned as he looked at the content of the scrolls he managed to acquire. He couldn't force himself to admitting that he stole them, but also it was not like he planned to keep them permanently. Once he had the necessary information, he would return them back to the archive. Also, ninja almost never stole things. They just acquired them for the person or the organization that paid them, sometimes kept those things for themselves, but by then, the original and supposed owner usually was dead and buried. The reason of his confusion was not the originality of the scroll, as far as he could tell they were genuine. What unsettled him the most was the lack of almost any Uchiha dead in the attack. He always knew that his clan took very few losses during that event, but seeing barely few dead on a list that went into thousands was chilling. He knew that the name he was looking for wouldn't be on the main list, so he skipped it and focused on the one that strangely contained only senior Jonin and ANBU. A thing that made him pause. What could have happened that so many ANBU and Jonin died in one place? From what he knew, there was no reason for them to die so suddenly and at once. His eyes slipped over the list, and then he paused as the name Uzumaki caught his attention. A single one on the list of over 2 dozens. Naruto's father is Namake's Minato, yet he has his mother's name, Sasuke murmured and paused. His name is Uzumaki. He smacked himself in the forehead and calmed down almost immediately. The temper of the Uchiha could be short, yet the excitement shoved aside his frustration. He finally had 2 names that he could use and actually tried to discover more. Assuming that as a genin he could get access to anything remotely useful. Everybody was lying with the history of their village and lives of its heroes, and genin didn't have much of an access to the true version of the events. At least what they had access to was less obvious lies and manipulations than what was fed to the academy students and the civilian population. He knew why it was done and understood the reason. After all, traitors weren't liked by any village, and all the ways to limit the number of them were good, not noble or moral, but those 2 things meant little for most shinobi. He pulled out a sheet of paper he had laying around and started to write down the places where something useful could have been placed. He immediately crossed out of his list the archives and the academy, as with his access he wouldn't find more than the usual propaganda. The chance to find something useful was almost none, and all he would do would be waste his precious time and make the Chunin working there wonder what he was doing. He was the last loyal Uchiha, he scoffed at that, The adoration of some girls was infuriating at the best of times, and he despised the fact that he sometimes couldn't simply walk through the village without any kind of the attention. It had some perks, like more leeway when he did something not entirely right, but he doubted that looking at the data related to the former Hokage would pass unseen. No, they would notice it, Sasuke thought unhappily and then considered the next position on his list. The cemetery was a thing he wasn't sure of, but considering the scarcity of options he had, it was possibly the best place to at least get an idea of what was going on. There was the option of asking his sensei. No, Sasuke spoke. Kakashi-sensei is a former ANBU. He would ask questions I'm not comfortable answering. I need to have a better idea first. Going to him with this is not enough. Jiraiya sipped his sake as he sat at one of the more quiet tables at the most expensive brothel in the town he was stopping. Across the table sat his informant, and he wondered how sane she was. Most of the information she so far gave him was reliable. However, what he was hearing from her now made him frown. So, a high-ranking ninja with Konoha sign was in Kusa 2 weeks ago? Jiraiya asked quietly, and his informant nodded. Can you describe the way they look? Medium height, has glasses, silver hair, violet and gray clothes. Jiraiya closed his eyes for a second, trying to imagine whoever it was. He had a nagging suspicion he found someone similar, but they weren't high-ranking Konoha ninja, nor did he know about them being out of the village. Do you know what did they do? Had a meeting with the elders, and that's all I managed to hear before the ANBU were told to leave. Jiraiya closed his eyes and pulled out a faint sketch of one Yakushi Kabuto, one that was nicknamed Eternal Genin by some jonin. However, quite a few in the ANBU suspected him of being more than a genin. His abilities were too high not to pass the exam for 5 times in a row, not to mention that he disappeared from the surface of Earth quite a few times. Is that him? Jiraiya asked, showing the sketch to his friendly Kusa ANBU. Yes, she said, and shot Jiraiya a questioning look. Do you know him, personally? No, he is supposed to be a genin, while at the same time being one of the brightest medics we had in our service since the time of Tsunadeheim. That's the official story, but I have a suspicion that he is an agent of a certain snake, and here I will need your help. Whenever I travel across Kusa, I have your ANBU on my back. Can you do a minor investigation on my behalf? That depends, she said, playing with her mask that laid on the table between them. I'm not suicidal and don't want to get caught doing something illegal. It's not illegal, Jiraiya said and grunted. Well, it's as illegal as any operation done by ANBU. Anyways, in Kusa there is a certain man that owns a warehouse and sells drugs. That's his official cover. In truth, he deals in far darker things, and I'm sure he is tied to Orochimaru. What does he do? Sells humans to Orochimaru and body parts, Jiraiya said. That's the things I managed to track down to him. He is supposed to have a couple of Nuke-nin on his payroll. If not, I would have paid him a visit, but since I'm not welcomed by your leaders, I don't want to cause mess in Kusa. I can do it, she said and snatched a scroll Jiraiya placed on the table. 3 S-rank missions payments, 1 for me, 1 for my team and 1 for bribes. And you will need to shelter all of those I will free. Very well, Jiraiya said and frowned as he tried to think about the timing necessary for it. In a week I will have 2 ANBU squads on the border of Hai no Kuni. They will know what to expect, and will have trained medics with them. I will be traveling with exhausted and injured civilians. Even if I use all of the hidden passages and rivers I can use, it will take me over 2 weeks, maybe less, but the chase won't be that easy to fool. The Hokage won't allow me to order our ANBU into your land. Jiraiya grimaced and looked at her. You know why? Yes, too damn well. With that she stood up and left the establishment, letting Jiraiya enjoy his sake and ponder about the future, and what his insane teammate was up to. His recent operations were more and more obvious and less from behind the scenes. Not to mention that this Kabuto guy was a person Ibiki should catch and interrogate, yet there was not enough solid evidence that wouldn't make it look like a purge. The TI could drag whoever it wanted for interrogation, but better they were right or their heads would roll, as the Hokage was rarely pleased when a wrong ninja was turned into a wreck, and that was the least worry. The clans tended to be furious when one of theirs was arrested without any justifications, and most of them had loads of dirt on the leadership of Konoha. Perhaps even more than Danzo, and didn't hesitate to use it when needed. This will explode in our faces, Jiraiya said with some disgust as he finished the sake. Time to go to Konoha and talk with the sensei. Maybe he has some secret plan, but as of now Orochimaru is playing on too many boards at the same time and sensei isn't much better. Harino Sakura was dead tired as she stumbled into Yamanaka Flower Shop. She weakly waved to Ino in greeting before almost collapsing onto the floor. What's wrong? Ino asked, walking out from behind the counter. Sensei, Sakura said and rasped for breath. My sensei decided to assign each of us an individual sensei, and a scary kunoichi called Anko is now my sensei. Ino blinked, color draining of her face. Anko? Midarashi Anko? Yes, Sakura said as she managed to regain some energy. What's wrong about her? Well, she works in the TI and is a former member of the ANBU, Ino said. Her eyes were full of pity. Her reputation in those circles is scary and many outright refuse working under her. Hold on. What is this TI? Division that gathers data, breaks codes, eliminates enemy spies and analyzes information we acquire from our various nets, Inoichi said as he slipped unheard both by Ino and Sakura. Both of you are supposed to not know that it exists until you are at least taking the Chunin exams. Not that it is that well guarded of a secret. Better than some other secrets of ours, but it is still supposed to be a secret. At this both girls blushed, but Inoichi just waved his hand and shrugged. It's not that bad if you know about it, he said, and then the gaze of his eyes darkened. But don't mention it to strangers and other genin. Since you are training with Enko, I guess you came here for some of the plants to make the poison she so likes? Hi Inoichi-sama, Sakura said. Well, it's a time for you to shine and show what you know about plants, Inoichi said, looking at his daughter. It is a time to test your knowledge on them anyways. Ino's form slumped, but she nodded and started to rummage through the various baskets, bowls and jars with plants, and their dried versions. Enko slipped into the tea completely unseen by the sentries on guard outside and stalked towards Ibiki. Ibiki-kun, I need a favor from you, she purred, her voice having a sultry edge to it. Ibiki looked up from the paperwork he was filling and let out a growl, one that would make anybody else. But Enko back off and wonder what kind of a creature did they just wake up. What? He asked. I need a mission for my cute little genin, Enko said and rolled her eyes at his frown. Training on dummies and mannequins and clones is all nice and good, but she needs some real target to kill. Civilian or something tougher? Ibiki asked and reached for a thick scroll. I still have 50 informants of the various spy networks to remove. Enko purred as she sat down on the desk and looked at the list. I want to have her a chance to use some more clean ways of assassinating targets, she said, her eyes swiping over the list. So I think one of the genin of her year or up to 2 years behind would be ideal. There are 2 that I want gone, Ibiki said and reached for 2 thin folder. Not that good, but nosy and poke very uncomfortable places. She kills them both. I'm willing to give her an A-rank mission pay. Those 2 will work, Enko said as she snatched the folders. Give me 2 weeks, and they will be dead. Make sure they look like an accident, or something more innocent. Or make it look like a failed attempt of rape, Ibiki said and shrugged. As long as the Jonin-sensei stays off my back, I don't care how your pet deals with them. I will think of something, Enko said with a seductive smile. You know that I always make sure the mission gets done. Sometimes too well, Ibiki grunted and glared at her. Out. The Hokage lit his pipe and enjoyed the silence for a few moments before looking at the reports from the ANBU he dispatched to follow the families that had the sigils of the Uchiha and Senju clans. At the worst it looked promising, at the very best, there would be a huge reinforcement for the village. There were in total maybe 300 people in total, a good number of them barely teens, making them an extremely potent force in the future. Now however he needed to approach them and peacefully convince to join the village. A thing that could prove to be a challenge or an extremely dangerous one, too. Fetch me Kakashi, Asuma and Kurenai, he called out, and the ANBU guarding his office disappeared in silent, smokeless shunshin. With that taken care of, he studied the notes. The families were nomads, moving through the wilder and less well-known parts of Hai no Kuni, which could have explained how was it that they lost sight of the rest of their clans, and it added a difficulty in actually finding them in that forest. He knew it was a dark and dangerous place, more dark than dangerous as most of the criminals was chased out of it. What he mostly worried about was reaching out to those families and convincing them to come to Konoha. The truth was that he desperately needed those families and their bloodlines to add to the potential of Konoha. The more men he had, the stronger the village was, and if the reports were true, all of those clansmen were trained in the ninja arts, and at least proficient in their usage. The doors opened and the 3 jonin entered the office, getting him out of his thoughts and bringing to the more immediate problem. Finding the damn nomads. Did you summon us, Hokage-sama? Yohi Kurenai asked, getting the Hokage out of his musings. Yes, I did, the Hokage said and motioned for them to sit in the 3 chairs in front of him. There is a certain matter that you and your teams will handle. He placed on the table a map of the Hai no Kuni, positions of the nomads marked clearly. In a week you with your teams, in case of Kakashi-kun team, just his current apprentice, will accompany me as I go there to establish contact with them, and negotiate them joining Konoha. Hokage-sama, Asuma said, and the Hokage flinched at the formal way of his son. Why is it that our teams are those joining you? Surely you could have chosen any team of ANBU or Jonin. I could have, and the ANBU would be more than willing. However, I don't want to be surrounded by the most lethal assassins we have when I try to negotiate a peaceful agreement. You 3 should have the necessary capabilities. While the genin look less threatening and more friendly than the assassins. That is a fair point, Kurenai said and then frowned, looking at the data. But they're not used to such missions and might not handle themselves well enough. Kurenai, have more trust in your students, the Hokage said and then looked at them. What do you think about what ANBU is reporting? If it is genuine, then we are lucky, Asuma said carefully. 300 more people is not much compared to the population of the village, but it is a lot of firepower, and at least 2 Kekkai Jinkai that we can add to our collection. If they're nomads, the ANBU could have missed around 10 to 20%, Kakashi added, making everybody look at him. I'm a tracker and trained quite a few ANBU about getting the job done. The nomads are the only group that I despise tracking. They can move in few groups at once and usually are as good as the trackers that want to catch them. They're ninja, they are constantly on the move and need to live in an environment that doesn't forgive mistakes. Shodame-sama mentioned that during the period before he and Madara founded Konoha, the life was far harsher for the shinobi, Hiruzen quietly said. There is a good chance that they live the same way our ancestors lived, and that means that even their children will be dangerous enemies. The chances that Konoha bring and the opportunity to have a shelter and live in peace, not worrying about someone raiding in the middle of the night is a thing that can convince them, Kurenai pointed out. Stability and the peace are things they should appreciate. Submitting to the rule of a Kage can be a tough thing to swallow for them, Asuma said and looked at Kurenai. You have that in Izuka in your team. They're in Konoha for close to 40 years and still have issues with understanding command chain and often need to be quite literally beaten to death before they submit. Indeed, Hiruzen said and smiled. They will most likely demand some kind of a challenge. One-on-one duel would be the most likely one. That's what we did when some of the wandering clans wanted to join Konoha. Their leader against me or each of us got to pick champions on some criteria we agreed upon, and they might try to test the younger generation, to see if the future of Konoha is safe and they should toss in their lot with our, Kakashi said and I smiled. Naruto should be more than capable of beating most genin. Asuma, could you show him some futon? He has that and for all my jutsu arsenal, I don't have many futon. That is true and some might not be pure combat. The Hokage shrugged. Some of them might be more refined and harder to pass. However, they might also join us without any challenges, especially if they see that they benefit more. He gave his jonin a look and then looked at the scrolls. In a week we will depart. Until then prepare your genin and don't do anything that will put them in the hospital. I'll stay, Kakashi said as Asuma and Kurenai left the room. Why should I only take Naruto with me? It's Sasuke's clan, not his that we're about to contact. Yes, Hiruzen said and reached into one of the drawers of his desk. This is a certain and a very interesting analysis written for me by Inoichi. He placed the scroll in front of himself and looked at it. Sasuke is an avenger and a shinobi we can't really trust not to snap and go rogue. On a mission that can spiral out of control very fast, I prefer a shinobi I know can behave. It might change his view of the village and might make him appreciate it, Kakashi said and the Hokage arched an eyebrow. He should recognize the benefits he gets from being loyal to Konoha. No. That single word made Kakashi recoil, as if someone slapped him across his face. No, he stays in the village until Yamato and Inoichi deem him stable and reliable enough. He is your shinobi, Kakashi, but it is me who decides what each of the shinobi does. I tell you jump, you jump. I understand, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said and bowed to his liege before walking out of the room. Naruto sat on the surface of the water, his mind wholly focused on his body and chakra flowing through it. He exhaled and his eyes opened as the chain slid out of his hand. This time it went much more smoothly than the last time. It was also much less draining on his body. He knew that he should take it slow, but the chains were so much fun and so useful. He smiled and whipped the chain at the nearby tree. The construct of chakra smashed through the trunk, splinters flying in all directions. He grinned and wrapped it around one of branches before easily tossing the massive chunk of wood into the air. He rarely enjoyed himself so much, and the chains gave him so much freedom and fun he didn't want them gone. Yet he could feel the weariness spread across his body, so he cut the chakra flow to the chain and let out an unhappy sigh. Right as Kakashi-sensei appeared in front of him. Decided to ignore the rules, eh? Kakashi asked, his sole eye focused on the demolished training ground. I told you not to use it beyond simply summoning it. Naruto flushed, but then he nodded. It's just that the feeling is so hard to say no to. Power, Kakashi said and Naruto looked at him. Everybody wants that and the chains give you that. I'm not saying that power is bad, it's just a thing you have. But look at Orochimaru or Uchiha Itachi, and you have an example of what can happen to you. Uchiha Itachi? Naruto asked as he tried to assign that name to someone or something. S-rank Nuke-nin, older brother of Sasuke, Kakashi said and sighed, sitting down. He was a rising star of his generation, an ANBU captain at 13, when most of people are admitted to ANBU at his age. Then something snapped inside of him, and he killed his whole clan, but not Sasuke. He would have been a contender for the title of the Godame, but he did it, and now is one of the most wanted Nuke-nin. So he is the man that Sasuke wants to kill? Naruto asked, a flashback to the first day of the existence of the team appearing in his mind. I want to kill a certain man, Sasuke told them on that fateful spring noon. Kakashi said. I don't blame him for that desire, but it's not the best idea until he knows the whole truth, and you should know how covered in lies our world is. Naruto dumbly nodded and Kakashi ruffled his hair, making him scowl fiercely. Time for you to train, the Jonin said. I talked with Asuma and he will wait for you on the training ground of his team. Even if he looks laid back and behaves as such, he was a bodyguard of the daimyo for a reason, and you shouldn't underestimate him. So he's like you? Naruto asked. Lazy and always late? Kakashi scoffed, and before he could say anything Naruto was gone. Not even a cloud of smoke suggesting that he was there seconds ago.